Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to Firing Range, a podcast to talk about all things Destiny, weapons, abilities, loadouts, and the sandbox at large. And we haven't been around for a while, but we had an opportunity to come back and have a nice discussion with former co-host of the show, now a member, a game dev at Bungie. Please join me in welcoming Mercules.
Hello, everyone.
The gentle wave to the camera.
Yep.
So tonight it's going to be me, Cammy, Drew, and Merc. Cool Guy will not be joining us, but we have a lot to talk about because the last two TWIDs up on Bungie.net over there have been pretty interesting and going over some stuff regarding the future of the sandbox and PvP changes going forward, starting, I believe, Merc, correct me if I'm wrong, March 5th is correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Excellent. So yeah, we actually have a bunch of questions submitted by the community, submitted by y'all. So for those of us joining live right now for the streamed version of this podcast, be aware this is not an opportunity to fire off a bunch of questions at Mercules. I mean, as much as we would all like to. He works on the weapons team, so he is at liberty to talk about what he is at liberty to talk about. We're not going to... Mercules, do you have authority to talk about everything under the sun at Bungie? Yes.
Do not.
Oh, no, you don't. Okay.
No.
Roger that. Okay.
Yeah.
So with what he is permitted to talk about, we'll go ahead and hit him with the questions that y'all have submitted. So again, thank you for doing that. And if we have opportunities for a discussion on any question, that'll be great. Merc, I believe you also have the list of questions somewhere. Great.
I do indeed.
Excellent. Did you want to go in order, or was there anything burning on this list that you wanted to start off on a particular order, or a particular, a particular step or note or something?
We can probably just go top to bottom because they're all kind of categorized into various things. So,
Sure.
I think it'll make it easier for listeners to follow along if we talk about all of the stuff that relates to one topic in one place as opposed to bouncing around.
Sounds good. And I do apologize if there is any strange audio in the background. On my end, I will try to mute very quickly. Something going on in my neighborhood. But more on that another time. So firing off with question number one, which says, I thought Bungie said they wouldn't try and make Checkmate into the default PvP experience when it first entered labs, but we are now getting a special ammo economy reminiscent of Checkmate paired alongside ability cooldown nerfs. Is this a case of changes on paper sounding more daunting than they are?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a super fair question. We did clarify on Twitter, and I quote, "It is not our intention to make the original Checkmate into the core PvP experience, but we are experimenting with the current iteration of Checkmate to gather data, lessons, and feedback we can use to eventually tune the base PvP sandbox." So the original Checkmate that we got is pretty substantially different from the tuning that's going to happen in the March update on March 5th. There are some similarities in that, we tuned ability cooldowns across the board. We tuned primary weapons, and we used an ammo meter to grant special ammo. But the way those things interact is pretty substantially different. And Checkmate was a huge swing in one direction, right? When you played Checkmate, you knew for a fact you were playing something different.
Right.
Whereas the changes that we're putting into the March 5th update are more, they're designed to where you can feel them. You can feel that your abilities are maybe a few seconds slower. You can feel when you hit a body shot that it's not as effective as hitting a crit. But they're not designed to be such large swings that the game feels unfamiliar on the whole, right? We're not trying to remove abilities from your kit. We're not trying to slow down everything across the board. It's really a more refined and a narrower focus on what we tried to balance in that one.
Yeah, removing abilities from the kit, that would be what hardware is for, right? Is that
Yeah, that is literally what hardware is for. And that's something players have been asking for a long time. Don't take these numbers that I'm going to throw out as
take these numbers.
Yeah, don't take these numbers as the gospel. I'm just going to use numbers as an example of the type of tuning that this is, right?
Okay.
It's if primary weapons were 50% of PvP. Like in the March 5th update, they might be like 60% of PvP, right? It's not like we're trying to make them 90% of PvP, where the only thing you can do is use double primary. Like we tuned health by 15%, right? We tuned ability cooldowns by 15%. Like that's kind of generally the window where we were looking to move the things, is like about 15%. It's not, this thing is no longer able to be used ever under any circumstances. Put it in your vault. Don't take it out for PvP. It's not that type of tuning, if that makes sense.
Got it. The interesting thing is when we have you on here, when we are fortunate enough to speak to anybody at Bungie, I'm always dying to ask like a million follow-up questions, but like I'm sure some of them it might be a natural conversation, to others it might be a not so natural conversation. I'm just so interested, like I'm sure you've got your hands in the dough plenty for what is coming down the pipe on March 5th, based on everything. I mean, that you just, all that, everything that you just mentioned about how it feels like you took a certain sized swing, but not a gigantic swing, right? Like, does it feel good? Like, I'm super interested in.
I mean, I like it a lot. Speaking for me personally,
Sure.
We've play tested it for a very long time. I personally have a lot of fun in it. And I think the changes that we as a team made were good changes for the health of the game overall. We all obviously read the original Sandbox tweet where we outlined the problems that the Sandbox kind of has, right? And those are real problems. They are really affecting the game. They are really affecting our ability to onboard players, to retain players. So like those are things that need to be addressed. And that's what we took a swing at doing, is addressing those things. And I personally, again, think from my time playing it in playtests that it did a pretty good job of it. But we will see when everything ships out live. I'm sure everyone in the community will have lots of feedback about it, and we'll be listening to that feedback, and we'll take what everyone says to heart, because it's a lot of variables changing all at once.
For sure. Yeah.
It's probably one of the bigger sweeping Sandbox changes we've done for PvP, maybe since Forsaken, honestly.
Wow, really interesting. Okay.
So, I mean, we're changing a lot of variables at once, and people have already brought up stuff like, well, why didn't you guys do this? Or why didn't you guys do that? And like at a certain point, it came down to there were a lot of changes in flight, and we had to kind of draw a line and like put the stuff out there and let players play with it and see where it is. And like, yeah, some stuff did get a little bit left behind, and some stuff is maybe too hot. But we have confidence that we can act quickly on those things.
Okay.
And tune and iterate and stuff like that. And there's a couple of other questions later on in the document that I think we'll touch on, like specifics of stuff that people were concerned about. So
can't wait. We're going to move on to the next question here. Oh, by the way, also, if we are super fortunate to have you here, and I want to be respectful of your time. So if at any point, I mean, usually we do an hour and a half, but if at any point, you got to tap something like that, you just let me know.
I blocked off the whole night for it. So
let's
go until we hit all the
questions. Okay. I can take the next one if you want, follow.
Please go ahead, Cammy.
Yeah, this one's close to home for this. How are the perks like Overflow, Shoot to Loot, Disaster Plan, Spark of Momentum on the art classes where you slide over the special ammo? How is that going to work in the new economy? Are there any changes planned?
So we want to start by saying, like, we are not finished iterating on the ammo system. Like, we are not finished iterating on the special ammo economy. We iterated a bunch all through labs and through Checkmate, and we made some changes, and the version that you're going to play is different than any version that you've had, before. Once that version goes out, we expect to continue to make iterations. And not only that, but at the same time that the special ammo meter goes into the wider Crucible sandbox, we're also going to be testing special ammo crates in Crucible labs, right? And in the special ammo crate system, Guardians do drop special ammo when they die if they have it. And so you can pick up special ammo bricks and trigger all of those perks in that system. If we do decide that the version of the special ammo economy that we want to use for the future does not have ammo drops in it, then we would likely go through and retune some of those perks as needed so that they can still trigger on a similar cadence, right? And they can still provide their benefits. To a certain extent, though, it is like not a guarantee that every perk is going to function in every facet of the game all the time and entirely equally. Sometimes we have perks that are like really high uptime in PvE and literally don't work at all in PvP. And so we'll have to decide when that time comes where we want all those perks to land. So it's not a guarantee that like every single perk will get refactored. Some of them we might just be like, okay, well, this one's just going to be, a PvE perk, or this one's going to have a completely different effect than what it did before, right? If that makes sense.
Okay, good answer.
Good call.
I recently got a Darkest Before gun that landed with overflow full auto.
I knew
so
you
I'm
would have that on
super
your brain.
excited to
I
review
knew you
that.
had that on your
It's
brain.
gonna be such a sick weapon.
That's why we're refreshing all those perk pools, right?
Damn right. Drew,
Do you mind if
wanna...
I take the next?
Yeah, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I like this question. It says, what's the design philosophy of SMGs versus ARs? Bungie has mentioned they don't want an AR meta, but lets SMGs run wild. It says,
Yeah.
please ask about SMGs and why they're still remaining untouched. Not talking about target lock. And I'm going to end there because it kind of goes on.
Right. These questions
So-
have been grouped together because many questions were asked in the same vein. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mark.
this one runs on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to hit on that first part, like the difference between ARs and SMGs, ARs have significantly more range than SMGs, and some of them kill almost as fast, right? Like a lot of ARs are easily hitting 35 to like 39 meters. And not only that, but ARs also have a really shallow damage and aim assist fall off. So they're still pretty effective even outside of that. Like high impact ARs, which actually are pretty slept on right now. Like people think, they're bad because of the RPM and stuff like that, but like they're actually pretty slept on. They're easily hitting 45 meters on their effectiveness, and they're outranging all but like the rangiest pulse rifles, which is kind of crazy, right? And outranging almost all hand cannons. So the reason we don't want an AR meta is because there's a much wider envelope that those weapons can be used in. And a secondary thing is that ARs are already like the hard meta at lower skills, like the hardest of hard metas at lower skills right now, right? So in order for ARs to be meta across the board, we've talked about this before, but like they are weapons that you have to remain on target. You can't peek shoot, you can't really jiggle shoot with them, right? So in order for them to be meta at the highest level, they have to just kill faster than everything else. And if we make ARs meta at the highest level, that means that there is literally nothing else in the game that matters at the lowest level, which, filters up, and it isn't a great experience, right? SMGs, conversely, on the other hand, and I know that this is going to sound hard to believe, but SMGs actually do have a little bit of a skill curve to using them, to the point that they are the least effective primary weapon for low skill players, like worse than bows and scout rifles.
The least effective for low skill players?
Literally, they're the least effective primary weapon for low skill players. And the reasoning behind that is because they are range capped to a certain extent. And like the inside of 20-meter range in our sandbox is like the zone of death. There's like a ton of stuff that can kill you inside of 20 meters and can kill you pretty fast. And so for lower skilled players whose reaction times might not be as fast or who aren't as good with their positioning, like it's actually difficult for them to use those weapons pretty well. And a lot of times they're better off using an auto rifle that has more range that they can play a little bit more safely. And as far as like SMGs being untouched, I went back and I pulled a bunch of stats from this. We have a historical document that we track like balance changes that we make, so we can see like when and how often we've tuned something. I went back and looked at SMGs. So since season 19, we have nerfed SMGs directly 8 times, and we have nerfed SMGs indirectly 5 times. So like we have actually touched SMGs more than any other weapon type over the last year in PvP. In addition to that, during Lightfall, SMGs peaked at 33% of kills in PvP, and they're down to 14% of kills now. So we've decreased their kills by 60% over the last year in PvP. And then the third thing is that SMGs are negative effectiveness across the board in PvP, except for one specific cohort, which is high skill players who are playing a very specific subclass. So, or a very specific class. So, it is like SMGs are still frustrating in the right hands, and we know that, and that's why we nerfed target lock in the March update. And that's why we also, if you notice the values that we tuned these weapons around, like we decreased body shot damage on SMGs in the March update. And also we didn't increase their critical hit damage as much as other weapons got increased, right? So we're still not done, but SMGs are not anywhere near the menace that they have been in the past. And it's not quite exactly truthful to say that we've been letting them run wild and we haven't touched them, because statistically, we've hit them more than any other single type of weapon in the game. So,
I know you can't see my webcam right now, but I would be imitating the Kylo Ren more GIF right
Yeah.
now.
And that's fine, and we'll see, right? But there's, at a certain point in time, like there's a reason we hit Peacekeepers most recently, right?
Sure.
The effectiveness of SMGs, even at high skill on Hunters and Warlocks, is significantly different than the effectiveness on Titans, right? And the Titan kit is completely different, and so it benefits a specific playstyle really, really heavily, and it doesn't benefit other playstyles quite as heavily, right? So we've already functionally driven SMGs like pretty into the ground for a majority of players in the game, right? And continuing to pound SMGs down is not, it's not addressing like the root concern anymore. So we're looking for other options, and obviously we hit Peacekeepers before, and we'll continue to make other changes, but at a certain point in time, it might not necessarily always be like the weapon itself, which is entirely broken.
So the reason I'm trying to get a brief paraphrase summary here is while we are recording this live, there will be the opportunity for y'all to listen to this podcast later at your leisure. But for those who are listening right now, kind of scrambled to put it together just because I misplaced some stream key information. So we are streaming on my channel instead of the usual DCP channel, and I forgot to turn off ads. So for a brief, 30 seconds there while you were talking,
right when he said where the buried treasure was, like, got ads.
Yeah, right when Merc revealed where the One Piece was, the ads may have come off. I've turned off ads now, so my bad. I scrambled to do that, but is a succinct paraphrase to say. So you said that you have nerfed SMGs. What was the number? Like 16 times? Or what was it? Like
we've nerfed SMGs directly 8 times, and I can actually tell you what those nerfs are. So we nerfed all SMG range.
Okay.
We nerfed lightweight SMGs specifically. We nerfed Ikelos. We nerfed aggressive SMGs. We nerfed Shieras. We nerfed Immortal. We nerfed stability on SMGs globally, and then we're nerfing damage in the March update. And then as far as indirect nerfs go, the range and zoom changes that we did indirectly nerfed SMG range. The Peacekeepers changes nerfed SMGs, and then we've nerfed target lock 3 times because of SMGs. And the third time and the March update is literally a nerf to target lock just on SMGs. So.
And in the future, you also so more SMG nerfs are not necessarily off the table. But you said that it could be. You also want to continue to to change what you think might be root causes. Is
Look,
that
when SMGs are across the board or nearly across the board, wildly ineffective, right? Even at high skill, so like global high skill, all classes, all subclasses, SMGs are less effective than pulse rifles, sidearms, auto rifles, and hand cannons in terms of like not their usage, right, but their actual effectiveness. So if we filter that data and we look at how effective they are on like warlocks and hunters, they are extremely not effective at all. So the only place they still retain positive effectiveness is high skill players playing on Titan, right? And so we have to look and we have to say across the game for a substantial swath of players, SMGs are not a strong choice. In fact, a lot of players who are using SMGs would probably be better off using sidearms, to be like completely honest. So at a certain point in time, we have to say, is it really a problem with the weapon, or is it a problem with something like Peacekeepers, which is only available to one class, right? And which sees very high usage. And that's why we hit Peacekeepers. And when we hit Peacekeepers, we saw an impact on the effectiveness of SMGs on that class. So maybe that's the right path, as opposed to continuing to drive SMGs themselves into the ground.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha. I think what people probably most want to hear is that you're not just like, all right, well, we're done. We hit SMGs. They're perfect forever where they are. It's more of a continued examination and making sure you're monitoring the effectiveness, and if they're out of pocket from what they think that what you think they should, or where you think they should be, what do you have to do? Then it's a continued effort, right? A never-ending battle.
We're not like, the March update isn't going to go out live and we're going to like turn off all analytics and just like shut down our social media and be like, all right, we're done here.
Yeah, we're done.
Like,
Pack it up.
That's good enough. We don't need to change anything else. Like, the March update is going to go out, and that sandbox has SMGs nerfed in it, especially in comparison to sidearms. And it also has more special ammo than what we've experienced previously in the iterations of checkmate that we've played in labs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of what keeps SMGs in check is things like shotguns and fusion rifles and other close range weapons like sidearms, right? And
Yeah.
compared even to the last iteration of checkmate that we played in trials, all of those things are, or at least two of those things are more prevalent than they were in that iteration, right? So,
Sure.
you know, we'll see how it goes. If we ship that and SMGs are still super hot, you know, just across the board, then we'll tune them again, and so it goes.
Fair. Just one follow-up question, because you mentioned that effectiveness is different than usage rate. I'm just so curious if you can share any insight on, and if you're not at liberty to say, you know, what's in the secret herbs and spices, like that's fine, I guess. But it's just, I'm so intrigued about the difference in what makes up effectiveness from a data standpoint, because you said, you know, different than usage rates, right?
Yeah. So usage is obviously just like the percent of time that something is equipped.
Of course, right.
You know,
right.
compared to everything else.
Right.
And even, you know, even the community has been able to figure out like a rough measure of effectiveness by looking at the percent of kills that a weapon gets, right? But all the community is able to do with the tools that they have is look at like usage, you know, kills divided by usage, basically. So imagine that you have that, but you can also filter it by pretty much every variable imaginable. So ammo type, weapon type, date, playlist, subclass, skill, everything else like that, right? So we can basically see like, okay, a weapon is equipped, you know, X% of the time for this cohort of players, and it nets this percentage of kills for this cohort of players during this specific date range on this specific map, right? So it's just a really, really detailed way of looking at whether a weapon is like overperforming or underperforming compared to other atoms in the sandbox or other elements in the sandbox.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask for this question just for clarification? Just because this was talking about the difference between ARs and SMGs. What are the main like actual attributes of the weapons that are different? Because I've like wanting that clarification too. You mentioned a little bit of aim assist. Mentioned like the aim assist drop off or fall off, I believe. Like what are like the main like just like differences of an AR and SMG like quickly if possible?
Yeah, so
like,
ARs generally have, obviously they're generally slower firing, right? Not all the time. Like we have 720 ARs, we have 720 SMGs, we have 600s both, right? But in general, slower firing, bigger magazine, higher zoom, and then the damage profile for the range and for the aim assist fall off, because it's a shoulder fired weapon and not a handheld weapon, is significantly shallower, right? So if an SMG starts damage fall off at like 22 meters, it might bottom out at like 27 meters, and it's just like totally worthless outside of that range, right? Whereas an auto rifle might start damage fall off at 35 meters and not bottom out till like 55 meters or something like that, right? So because it's a shoulder fired weapon, that's how all of our shoulder fired weapons work. Scout rifles, pulse rifles, auto rifles, all the rifles basically, they have a more gradual damage and aim assist fall off profile, and they also have higher zoom, right? Because they're shoulder fired weapons, it makes sense that they're longer range. Meanwhile, our handheld weapons, hand cannons, sidearms, SMGs, lower zoom, sharper profile in terms of how the fall off works, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there any like considerable difference between like accuracy and aim assist on it too? I'm just asking for my personal interest.
I mean, yes, but it's probably not enough to where the general player is going to be able to tell in general gameplay. So auto rifles have like by default a little bit tighter of an accuracy cone than SMGs do, but because of the way aim assist and damage fall off works in our game, a lot of the time the game is telling you like you're outside of range before the accuracy cone actually makes you start missing, right? It's telling you like, hey, you're doing less damage, or hey, your aim assist is starting to fall off. And it warns you that you're getting outside of the optimal range of the weapon before the accuracy cone kind of comes into play. And you actually start missing shots because your target is too small compared to the size of the accuracy cone on the weapon, right? Aim assist, there are also some values, like SMGs have a fair amount of aim assist. Most primary weapons are within the same general area, and some are just slightly higher than others, right? Like bows, hand cannons, SMGs are pretty high. Yeah, stuff like that. But they're all about the same. It's not like it's a huge difference between one and the other. They're all pretty close to each other. So it's like, fractions of a degree, basically.
Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Boys, we good on that? I know we could probably spend the entire night talking about this one topic, but any additional follow-up questions before we continue on with this laundry list of questions we have? Excellent. Okay. We could potentially circle back later. I'm sure Merc would love that. Okay, here's the next one. Some players have expressed concerns with the upcoming sandbox changes, that the upcoming sandbox changes will lead to a team shot / death ball meta like Destiny 2 Year 1. What lessons were learned from previous iterations of the game to address this, and what options would players have to contest this playstyle?
The March update sandbox is not really very similar to the D2 Year 1 sandbox. It's much closer to like the Forsaken era sandbox, I guess I would say. Like, there's very little that is similar to the D2 Year 1 sandbox. In D2 Year 1, we had slower optimal TTKs on all weapons by like a pretty wide margin. We had significantly reduced special ammo to the point that it was power ammo.
Yes.
Right. We had slower player mobility. We had abilities that were both less lethal and less common. Right. So pretty much across the board, even after the March update, everything we have is a far cry from what it was like in D2 Year 1. So, highly skilled players still should have a lot of tools at their disposal to break up death balls, right? I mean, I would also point out that currently, right now in the sandbox, even as it stands, it's still always a good idea to group up with your teammates, right? Like, team shotting is stronger than doing something solo. That happens right now already.
Sure.
So I don't know that we're necessarily going to see a substantial increase in it from what's already happening. But we're not exactly removing all of the tools that you would have to counteract such gameplay, especially if you're a high skilled player, because high skilled players who are hitting their crits, your optimal TTK is the exact same as it is in live. But for players who can't hit their crits, it's not. So if you're good with that primary and you're playing against people who aren't as good with the primary, like, you're going to notice a difference in the success rate of your engagements, especially compared to what's in live.
That's all fair. I'd like to remind the people at home that yes, these are community submitted questions. I'm glad for the extensive answer on that. I feel like I was having a similar discussion with my Twitch chat when this came out, and it was like, they're turning it into Year 1. It was like, are they though? But like, are they? It's pretty different.
That's probably the most asked question I get on all these topics, is that one right there. I have some choice words for that one, but I'm not gonna like side tangent it.
No, it was,
I mean,
it was well spoken.
it's not D2 Year 1. We'll play it when it ships. Like, we'll all play it when it ships. And another thing is that if there are facets of the March update that aren't working great, like, we can iterate and we can tune them. Like, what we're shipping in March is not the final stop for PvP. It's not going to be like we ship it and then we're like, all right, we did our part, we're done. Like, we're going to ship it, we're going to get feedback, we're going to continue to work on it to improve it and to make it better, right? So
nice. I can keep going. Cammy, do we want to keep going in a circle here, or
Yeah, we can do that.
Go ahead, buddy.
Yep.
All right, so based on the changes to more primary focus gameplay, do you guys think hybrid weapons such as Revision Zero, Vex, and Hawkmoon will see an increase in usage?
I think they will. We think they will, but there are built-in skill checks required to run those weapons and to be able to take advantage of the exotic perks that they offer. And just those like built-in skill checks kind of prevents them from seeing, like, massively wide usage, right? Like, we'll talk about this later. I think when we talk about Wishender and like Devil's Ruin and stuff. But if we put like a kill trigger on something, it will like instantly cut usage by like 50%.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Just because for a large amount of players in PvP specifically, not necessarily in PvE, but in PvP specifically, just because like there's a large amount of players who can't reliably net the kill needed to use the thing and then get a second kill using the thing. right?
Right.
So for a large amount of players, putting something behind a kill trigger is just like, well, I'm never using this in PvP again. And
Really?
so, yeah. And so things like Hawkmoon requires even more than a kill. It requires, technically they're headshots, same with the Revision Zero, right? Like technically they're headshots, but it's more than a kill's worth of headshots that you have to get. So like you can farm them by sitting in the back and just like plinking away, but it's not really very effective. And it's not really, for most players, you're probably better off just doing something else with your time, right? So the built-in skill checks are kind of going to keep those things in line. But we think it's a fun, it's a fun choice to make, right? Like, okay, well, I'm less likely to get sniped. Do I want to run Revision Zero now? Because I might be able to be the one who gets the sniper bullet when no one else has one. And that makes me more powerful. But the trade-off is like, well, if I'm using Revision Zero, I can't use No Time to Explain or something. So,
man, you put the thought in my head that since a lot of people apparently don't lean into weapons in PvP that have kill specific requirements. Excuse me. Are you telling me that so many people out there will never know the joy of using the cryosthesia in PvP?
We should probably hope that a lot of people out there don't ever learn the joy of the
that gun is
cryosthesia
disgusting.
in PvP.
Like it's
Yes.
really, really
Yeah, it is.
disgusting.
Yep.
Like,
Yes.
okay, moving on. Oh, Drew, go ahead.
Cool. Any thoughts on the DMT in its current state? And it mentions here, especially on console. There you go,
Yeah.
a little bit more in depth, and it says the exotic perk feels kind of meh nowadays. 120 aggressive scouts is an archetype. Are you pleased on where they sit today? Feels like they were made to hip fire, but kind of suck at it. That's like the full question.
Yeah, so DMT, we definitely agree on that. We're gonna buff it a little bit in the final shape. The final shape has like a bunch of exotic tuning and stuff that's coming along with it, right? And so in the final shape, we're buffing it. We're gonna increase the hip fire rate of fire from 130 back to 140, so it's gonna match, an adaptive hand cannon. We've increased the magnetism fall off scale, which obviously affects controller. So it's gonna buff it on controller a little bit. We've removed the PvE only damage buff and added a 15% damage bonus at maximum cranial spikes. So it's going to be stronger when you hit max. And we've done a couple of other things. I think it also now grants stability in addition to the aim assist, and it increases the reload speed a little bit more. I think to offset it, we may have reduced the accuracy benefit slightly, but again, that's something that usually only comes into play when you're using it at like extremely long range. So yeah, DMT is definitely getting a buff. It's at times in the past it has been a horrifying weapon in PvP.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
I feel like that gun it rides the line between either like, oh my god, it's insane, I must use it, it will destroy people, or it's like, oh, all right, I'll put it on the shelf for a
Let
while.
them cook.
Yeah, and as far as 120s as a whole, we're going to kind of talk about this in the next question as well. But we are buffing the text-bound stock origin trait in March, which all the current aggressive scouts have as an origin trait. So that will be good. The Trials one is coming out, which is like kind of a step monster. And also it has, I can probably spoil this. I hope the snipers don't kill me for doing it. But it has like hip fire grip in one slot and offhand strike in the other slot. And you can obviously put the free hand grip mod on it. So like pretty hip fiery. And then in addition, like the March update PvP sandbox, 120 scouts get a buff by proxy because they maintain their 2 crit 1 body through all resiliences, whereas 120 hand cannons do not, right? So yeah, so they kind of get a little bit of a buff by proxy. We got to be careful with super rangy stuff like that. The same way we don't really want an AR meta across the board, we don't really want a scout rifle meta across the board, because scout rifles have darn near unlimited range on most of our maps, and especially with snipers getting nerfed and sniper uptime being reduced, and bows getting nerfed, like the counters to scout rifles have come down a bit. So we buffed lightweight scouts like Mida. That's obviously one thing we talked about, and the aggressive scouts are getting the buffs that we just talked about. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see if we can ride that line.
I'm just looking over at the camera, trying to see Drew's face as Merc is like, oh, Mida multi-tool, little nerd. You're just like, All right, moving right along here. In the new system, even a little damage drop-off from 140 RPM hand cannons can result in a 4-shot kill instead of a 3-tap. Effectively, this is a nerf to their optimal range. Is this intentional?
Yeah, I mean it is intentional. Almost every other weapon in the sandbox got its crit to body ratio forgiveness reduced by a little bit, by like 1 bullet or sometimes 2 bullets. And we could not reduce 140 hand cannons at all because they already took 3 crits to kill, right? And we saw in the early iterations of Checkmate when we moved everything around 140 hand cannons, and 140 hand cannons stayed where they were at, like it was pretty much just free reign for them in that sandbox, right? So we brought their optimal damage down comparatively, meaning we buffed it less than we buffed other options, which puts them like right on the edge of they're doing just enough damage to kill in 3 crits, right? So that means, yeah, if you have stepped into damage fall off, you're not going to be able to 3 crit anymore. And what we've seen in the last couple iterations of Checkmate, when this damage shooting was already in there, is that it did a lot better job of balancing them without it was a different lever for forgiveness, right? So part of forgiveness is the crit to body ratio in terms of like how often can you miss the headshot and still get your optimal TTK. We talked about that in the TWID. Another part of forgiveness is how far outside of your optimal range can you be and still get your optimal TTK, right?
Right.
So because we couldn't affect the crit to body ratio, we took a different tact for forgiveness, and we affected how far outside of your optimal range you can be and still get the optimal TTK. And in this case, it's 0.
Understood.
Love that.
Okay, I think this is my question now.
Sure is,
I am
buddy.
interested to hear what the team's thoughts are on special weapons that are functionally primaries, like Forerunner, Ariana's Vow. It feels like they're hit hardest by the special ammo change, so I'm wondering if they have any thoughts on how they might keep them competitive.
Yeah, this is one of those areas that we talked about where there were a lot of variables in play, and we didn't want to tune too many levers at one time, right? So we could have made it to where these weapons all did massively increased damage to account for the lower uptime, or they had tons of ammo given to them on the ammo transmats. And those are things we thought about, but we wanted to see how they worked in live first before we did that. We did tune Forerunner's damage up a little bit. That's mostly to make sure that it continues to 3 crit at all resilience levels, right? So we did tune Forerunner's damage up a little bit. But the new ammo systems, both the crate system and the ammo meter system, offer us like a pretty decent amount of granularity as far as how we can tune ammo values for these weapons. So if, for example, Forerunner or Arianas are just not seeing any use at all, and they're really not feeling like good choices in the upcoming sandbox, we could say, okay, well now Forerunner gets 12 shots instead of 8 per ammo pull, right? And we could actually lean more heavily into this is a primary special weapon hybrid, as opposed to where they sit right now, which is kind of like, yeah, it's a primary special weapon hybrid, but it's really just a special weapon in PvP.
Is there a world where they could probably get the kill credit towards the special meter? Or is that like going too far off script?
That is probably that might king make them. I don't know. We would probably have to talk about that internally. I mean, I believe
It just makes
technically
me
it's
think of
something we could do,
traces.
but well, you should give traces a shot because people are sleeping on them, and I'm telling you, man, traces are maybe my favorite special weapon in both of the two, specifically in the crate system. I think in the crate system.
In the crate system, I could
Yeah.
agree, but like thinking
Yeah.
the checkmate system,
Yeah.
it's just I would have to run a primary, right? And so I'd have some range problem eventually.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes. If traces are still too weak, the damage buff did a lot. If you recall, a few patches back when we buffed traces, we buffed their damage by like a minuscule amount. It was like 1 damage, or like half of 1 point on the body shot damage, and like 0.1 on the crit damage. And it was because like when we moved them any higher than that, they were just like absolute monsters to play against. And we buffed them by 20% in the new system and after the March update. And like part of that was to offset the 15% increase to health, but they got a 20% buff to damage. So it more than offsets the 15% increase to health, and it like kicks them up a notch. And I think they feel pretty good. So we'll see how it
That
goes.
sounds great. The bigger snack to me was the nerf to hand cannon flinch output. That with trace rifles, now I'm excited.
Cammy,
Yeah.
do you find that trace rifles are pretty, do you feel effective with them on mouse and keyboard? Question for Cammy.
Very effective. Like
Really?
as in if I load into Rumble with a Prometheus lens or something, it's gonna cook.
I guess I just haven't been using the weapon type that much. I play the vast majority of PvP these days on mouse and keyboard, and I kind of stay in my lane for what feels good to me. And like mouse and keyboard, trace rifles just don't feel that good to me. Then again, I haven't used them in a couple
Opinion-wise, I
months.
think the lens is kind of built different compared to the other exotics, and then the legendaries are a tier below that for as far as that secret sauce of the gun sticking.
Just kind of feels
on
good.
somebody.
So try out the Prometheus as my training wheel entry back to trace rifle M&K.
Yes.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And then when you get goated with it, go to Cold Heart. This like snap targeting with Cold Heart is wild.
Gotcha. So we're doing like Goku like weighted training, or like we're trying to get to
The
different
OG
levels of
target lock.
Gotcha.
Dude, you should have seen Shroud on that back in the early seasons. This is wild.
Oh damn! All right. Drew, you want to take the next one? Scroll to the document,
Sure.
brother.
Yeah, I'm like trying to remember
where are we?
I'm not gonna lie.
I think we're at the reducing
Is it
forgiveness
Wishender?
on weapons. I think.
The 120 hand cannon. A
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of the
yeah.
focus.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay, I
there
see.
you- Yeah, he's got.
All right, so a lot of the focus seems to be on reducing forgiveness on weapons. 120 hand cannons took a big hit. Now people are looking at perks like precision instrument to take back some of that forgiveness.
Right.
What are your thoughts about this? This could make these perks feel mandatory.
I mean, by definition, they're not mandatory if they give forgiveness, right? Like, not everyone needs that forgiveness. Like at a certain skill level, that forgiveness might not be doing a ton for you in most of your engagements. So then that frees you up to take something that potentially increases your damage or increases, any or plays into your play style a little bit differently, right? So I think as it stands right now, we're all right with a perk that increases forgiveness of a weapon being a perk that a lot of people choose. As long as there is a level above that where people will be like, 75% of the time I hit the 3 crit. I don't really feel like I need precision instrument for that. I'm going to go with something that ups my damage or ups my range or changes something else, right? So we'll keep an eye on it. It's kind of like the way Headseeker works right now on pulse rifles, right? Like Headseeker's like an S tier perk on pulse rifles. But if you're two bursting people anyways without it, like, Headseeker might help some engagements, but you might get more mileage out of a perk that does something else for you, as opposed to a perk that offers you forgiveness when you don't necessarily need it. And I know that like there's the argument between like when, I think Cool Guy calls them win now and win later, or like consistency or kill chaining perks, right? And some people, even at the highest skills, will take consistency over everything else 100% of the time, no questions asked. And that's fine. Like that's entirely, that's entirely valid. And some people are like, I'm going to hit those shots, and I want something that's going to allow me to absolutely obliterate the next person who walks around the corner, right? So
that's fair.
I had a question about the resilience. I guess it would be. Is it 7 resilience? I know there's some talk like between like is it 7 or 8 that bumps the 120s. Do you happen to know that?
I believe it's 8.
It's 8.
I'd have to actually. I can check. I have my little spreadsheet.
Dope.
So 7 resilience. Let's see. So 6 resilience. Yeah, it is 7 resilience. Actually, I was incorrect. 7 resilience is where they go to a 3 crit instead of a 2 crit 1 body.
Then follow up on that. You go first.
Okay, sure. I was gonna say I have a more like personal philosophy of in-game build crafting question that I was going through with my stream today. So keeping in mind that you mentioned like there is a higher level of players that could say like I'm just gonna hit the 3 crit. Do you invest in the 7 resilience to bump that margin of error or no?
Do I?
Yeah. Would you?
I do. I would. Yeah. Me personally, if you're talking about me, yeah, I run higher resilience. I run 7 resilience on my hunter currently on live. Now that being said, I think this is kind of a decent question because I think the next question was actually about resilience changes in PvP. And we know that there's like a frustration, especially among hunters, about like having to deal with resilience. We actually were really careful with these changes to push a lot of the resilience thresholds down from what they were, right? So yeah, 120s now have that resilience threshold at 7. But it used to be that a lot of our resilience thresholds sat at about 6 or 7. And now most of the resilience thresholds in the new sandbox are down at 3, right? So we've actually taken that like base level of resilience that you kind of felt like you needed to hit to get the most effectiveness out of it, we've actually pushed it down so it's easier to hit. And yes, that has introduced a couple of new resilience checks at the upper end, but it's a lot smaller number than it was in the previous sandbox. So we're actually like tried pretty hard to slide that down the scale as opposed to the other way around. So we didn't want to make resilience more effective in this, right? So players should, feel free to be like, oh, I don't want to have to invest everything 7 on a hunter. Well, you don't necessarily need to now, because especially like the resilience check at 7 for a 120, like you're already getting 2 crit 1 bodied right now in the sandbox by 120s, right? It's not like it's changing, that behavior specifically. And then they also asked about like there's some weapon archetypes that will be affected by someone being at 10 resilience where like TTK shifts them. And it's like, I think there's 2 of those and neither one of them are meta options right now. So like, I really don't think anyone's going to be building into 10 resilience to shift a rapid fire auto from a 0.77 TTK to a 0.83 TTK, right? Like you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference in that in your gameplay. And that's also, they have to hit 100% crits anyways. So it's like, it's really probably not that effective, but if it is, and like rapid fire autos just like fall off a cliff because of it, like we can tune the rapid fire auto damage up by, a fraction of a point to prevent that from happening. So
that's
Would you
funny.
ever
I
go up
landed
to the
on
9?
7-3 anyway. For
Would you
different
ever go up
reasons
to
in
the
the old
9?
Sen.
Because apparently for precision instrument on 120s, it's like you have to go for one of the permutations or combinations, like apparently 9 stops it. Would you ever care to stop that? In your personal gameplay, like no wrong answer.
Oh, no, I'm not going to invest that much in PvP.
So you're going 7.
Me personally. Yeah, I'm probably going to go 7. But I'm also going 7 because I think I actually probably look at resilience. And again, this is me talking personally about my gameplay in PvP.
Yeah.
I think I look at resilience
totally.
differently than a lot of people do. I actually care a lot less about like the weapon breakpoints. And I care more about like, there are a lot of sources of damage that are incoming, right? And those things stack up. And the amount of times I survive engagements with what literally looks like 1 HP of health is enough to keep me running like the higher resilience levels. And it's not necessarily because I hit somebody's breakpoint with one weapon. It's because I got hit by a combination of 3 things. And that combination of 3 things added up to just enough to not kill me. But if I'd been running like 5 resilience, I would have died. So I look at it like there's a lot of sources of damage in this game. And those combinations are not really something that's scrutable to me as a player. But I have obviously played a lot, and I've played a lot at a bunch of different resilience levels. And I noticed myself surviving with a fraction of health at higher resilience levels, just enough to keep me wanting to invest in that. Even when the precision breakpoints go down for a bunch of weapons, or the optimal TTK breakpoints go down for a bunch of weapons. But I sacrifice things in my build crafting to do that. So
cool.
Yeah. I was gonna say for mine, sorry to interrupt on that one, was whenever damage resist is taken into account, like Stasis Crystal or Omnioculus or something like that, I pick 7 and 3 for entirely different reasons. It's to make sure that they cannot wave frame disruption break or bow disruption break me. It's so funny to see it come up. My follow-up question was gonna be, would Precision Instrument 3-tap Overshield Titans at 10 resilience?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think if you hit body, I want to say if you hit body crit, it will.
Head on Overshield.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, head. Yeah, it should, because that's going to give you 12 extra damage, I think, maybe. I don't know. You asked me
Overshield is
questions.
plus 40.
You asked me questions I didn't get prepared for. I could have looked up this data.
No problem. No problem.
Put them on the spot.
I could have looked up this data.
I think it does right
known,
now,
yeah.
but I'm not sure if with the extra 30, if the math adds up to that. And that's like one of the things I'm most curious about, since it's on topic.
I mean, it may be surprising that I don't know literally every value of every weapon and every perk combined just off the top of my head.
How
I feel like I'm
dare
pretty
you.
close. But I don't know
Come on,
all of
bro.
that off the top of my head. But I think it's it's like 4% bonus per thing. So
And
it feels like it'd be pretty close, right? They do 88 to the head now. See, now you got me doing math on my phone calculator, because now I'm curious about it.
and you call
Sorry, not
yourself
sorry.
John Bungie. You should have this info ready to go, bro.
I think it will. I think, don't quote me on this, okay? I know that someone's going to post on Reddit the game that I work on, but like I think it should do enough to where Precision Instrument will let you 3 crit in every shield titan.
Okay, then that's locked in for me.
Yeah,
That's
I was
the
gonna
first.
say lock that in right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Cool. Actually, so you did mention that there is an upcoming question on this document regarding health changes. There is a question before that, which kind of makes me giggle a little bit. Someone wants to know, what is the purpose of rapid fire shotguns in PvP? Is there even one?
So
Is there?
So kind of like when we talked about perks earlier, it was like not everything needs to have a place in all facets of the game. It's okay for something to be good in one place and not good in other places.
I think
and I'm
that's
not saying
fair,
that
yeah.
rapid fire shotguns necessarily have that niche right now. It might be that we need to buff rapid fire shotguns in PvE to make them better so they have a niche, right? And then
Sure.
it's like kind of okay that they're not great in PvP. But we did something pretty interesting with the ammo crate system. Which is maybe a little bit of a gamble, but I'm pretty excited to play with it personally. Where the ammo crates give you a % of your magazine size for ammo instead of giving you just like a flat amount. For I think exotics we hand tune, so exotics get like a fixed amount. So like Cloud Strike's not going to get 3 sniper shots right out of an ammo crate.
Oh,
It's just
thank
going to
the
get
Lord.
2.
Okay.
Right, and like conditional finality will just continue to get 2, even though its mag size is 2. But for shotguns, rapid fires by default have a much higher mag size, and so rapid fires will get 3 shots out of an ammo crate instead of 2. Whereas other shotguns, if you want to get 3 shots out of an ammo crate, you have to invest in a mod or a mag or something like that to boost your mag size. And some of them, like aggressives, I'm not even sure you can get 3 shots. So that might give them a little bit of an edge where it's like, what is the purpose of rapid fires, right? Like the Rick and Morty, it's like, what is my purpose? It's like your purpose is you get 50% more ammo than every other shotgun in PvP at the cost of like, you're not quite as lethal. So
Would
we'll
that-
see.
I think it's
Would that
fair.
archetype magazine scaling apply to the checkmate system of building up the special meter?
No.
In the future?
So the checkmate system is fixed values, like
Understood.
across the board. Yeah. So it's just the ammo crate system that uses that type of modifier.
All right, just for the viewers out there then, the point of rapid fire shotguns is to bank up all this ammo in checkmate just to use on that one dude who's going to solo super you. Like, go ahead, do it. I have Fourth
Yeah.
Horseman. Go ahead.
The Fourth Horseman plan. Yeah.
I also agree with you just in general that, I can't imagine that every weapon in the game is like, this must have a place in every corner of the, right? Like, I feel like some weapons are more built with a purpose to be used in PvE. Other weapons are more built with a purpose to be used in PvP, right? And I think that's okay for the most part. I'm not personally clamoring for rapid fire shotguns to rise up in PvP or anything like that, but
Something the new sandbox does well is, and we're not going to see a ton of this in the original iteration of it, just because again, a lot of variables. We wanted to make sure it just went out the door solid first. And this actually comes from a question someone asked, which was like, in playtesting, do the new health and damage values give underperforming archetypes a more competitive spot? And they specified like lightweight pulses, adaptive SMGs, or scout rifles, right? And we talked about for aggressive scouts for 120s, it does. But there's also other stuff that like, because all of our weapons were so forgiving in the previous iteration of the sandbox, it didn't really make sense to use a weapon just because it was forgiving, because like everything was forgiving, right? Why would you use a 180 hand cannon that 2 crits 2 bodies when you could use a 120 hand cannon that 2 crits 1 bodies, right? Like the delta there between those two things was not wide enough to really make it worth using something because it was forgiving, right? But in the new sandbox, because the body shot TTKs have been increased as much as they have, there's actually a lot more room for us to do some tuning there. And we can really say like, 180 hand cannons are going to go out the door at 3 crit 1 body. But what if we put 180 hand cannons back to 2 crit 2 body in the future? Now they're super forgiving, especially compared to everything else. And maybe that makes up for a little bit of their shortcomings, right? Like it's a much bigger difference. Even a 3 crit 1 body is a bigger difference between 3 crits than 2 crits 2 bodies and 2 crits 1 body is, right? When we're talking about 180s versus 120s on the hand cannon scale. So if it actually gives us room to make guns that specific purpose is to be forgiving and actually differentiate them from the super strong weapons that just either kill fast or deal tons of damage,
fair.
So the next question I'm going to skip because you kind of answered it on the 120 hand cannon question. It was something regarding resilience, but moving on. Why were Wishender and Devil's Ruin nerfed in ways that seem to maintain the issues that make them hard to play against? Why not give them kill triggers so that a player has to earn wall hacks or the charge beam and they can't have an endless supply?
So I kind of answered that earlier when I talked about kill triggers, but it's like if we just wanted to actually remove something from play, like in PvP, we can add a kill trigger to it. That kind of stinks for those weapons. Like what makes them unique is the wall hacks. What makes them unique is the charge beam. And yes, those things can be frustrating, but especially initially when we're doing like a first tuning pass on these things that have become problematic, like we don't want to go straight to the nuclear option and just like dismantle them for PvP. We'd really like to be able to maintain what it is that keeps them unique and find a place for that uniqueness where it can coexist alongside the rest of the sandbox. And it still does the thing, but maybe it doesn't do the thing so often or so strongly that it's really frustrating to play against all the time. But it still allows people to use it if they choose to.
That's fair. I'm just thinking of how maybe horrible and wonderful it would be if I were in charge. I feel like I would do like because I understand the philosophy of like, yeah, let's not overhit it too hard, right? Let's see if we can make it. Let's live and let live, right? Yeah, are they frustrating? Sure. Let's gradually slide down that hill into a place of comfort, and I'd just be like, hit it with a bat. Oh, I hit it too hard. All right, let's bring it up gently.
Like sometimes that has to happen, right? Especially on things that we've touched multiple times in the past before, and it hasn't made a difference. Like sometimes the core design of a thing is just going to be frustrating, you know, regardless of how many little levers we move around it, right? Like Antaeus wards was that thing. Special ammo LFRs were that thing.
Oh god.
Like sometimes we just have to crush something and be like, stop using this. Right? It's really unfortunate to do that because there are players who legitimately really enjoy using things. And like the net fun of those things may be pretty heavily negative when they're meta, right? But a lot of times when we hit them that hard, they not only go from like not being meta, they go to like not seeing use at all. Like they literally don't exist in that sandbox anymore. And that's a little bit of a shame.
Comes to mind.
Right. Like everyone you know, recently has been pretty upset about bows and like bow usage in PvP, right?
Yeah.
Bow usage went from like 4.5% of primary weapons to like 5.7% of primary weapons, right? And everyone was like, bows are everywhere. It's a bow meta. Like bows are ruining the game, stuff like that. And if we were to just nuclear option bows, which it sounds like we hit bows pretty hard because of the combination of changes, and maybe we did, and maybe we'll have to revisit those and pull those back, right? But actually bows are still very capable of doing what they are intended to do, which is have really long range and deal a ton of damage in a single shot, right? Like they're great support weapons, they're great team shotting weapons. They can still do that stuff in the sandbox. They're just slightly less frustrating to play against because instead of you having 200 health and you getting hit for 150 on a crit, which is 75% of your health gone, you have 230 health and you get hit for 130 on a crit, right? Which is a lower percentage of your health gone. Right. So it can still two-tap you, but it's less frustrating for you as the victim to see that much of your health go away all at once. But like if we were to actually crush those things and they were to disappear, like the net fun then shifts the other way, where like people weren't really unhappy about bows when they were at 4%. And the people who were using bows were very happy about using bows. If we drop bow usage down to 0, well, now the rest of the sandbox or the rest of the players, like their happiness hasn't exactly gone up because bow usage went from 4% to 0%. But the 4% of players who are using bows, their happiness has gone way, way down. Right. And that's the type of stuff that we want to try to avoid if we can at all help it. Like we're not going out to try to destroy things. I know people think that we destroyed Fighting Lion, right? But we tried Fighting Lion. In fairness to Fighting Lion, we tried it with a 10% nerf and the health bump, and people were spamming it like the entire first, couple weeks of Checkmate,
Yeah.
So like it sounds like in this sandbox that would kill it, because in this sandbox, special ammo GLs have way higher uptime and special ammo has way higher uptime. In a Checkmate sandbox, there may still be some use for it, but if it's not, again, we can iterate on this stuff. Like this isn't necessarily where Fighting Lion is going to be forever and always. If Fighting Lion just completely falls out of the game and nobody's using it, then we'll revisit Fighting Lion and we'll try to bring it back up to a place where the people who really care about it can use it without it being a frustrating experience for everyone else to have to deal with.
That all makes sense. I was not to upset the bow mains in the chat right now, but I was pleased, I guess, for lack of a better word, that the upcoming changes to bows in the March 5th PvP update. I still want people to have fun, right? I want people to use what they want to use and have fun, but it can be
part of the joy
really frustrating to fight a bow.
Part of the joy of Destiny is that there's a lot of stuff in the game, right? And you can use a variety of things, and not everyone wants to. Like some people just want to use what the strongest thing is or what the thing is, and that's fine. But there's a lot of other elements of the game that you can choose to partake in. And I think for a number of players, myself included, like part of the fun is finding something that maybe not everyone else is using and using that thing and being good and being effective with it and still being able to compete at a high level. You know, so we want to try to keep that aspect in the game. But at the same time, I actually think the next question is like about glaives. And so this is kind of prescient. But like we have made a concerted effort to limit the effectiveness of some of these cheesier builds. I think bow swapping is probably one of the better examples of it, because like, if you play someone who's good at bow swapping, there's very little that you can do to counter it, right? And it feels like there is a skill gap that is required to be good at bow swapping. Like you have to put in some time, you have to put in some effort, you have to learn the muscle memory, the timing and stuff like that. However, it was pretty forgiving to do in the previous sandbox where you could like, you know, crit with a bow, which is super easy, follow up with a body shot. You barely even have to aim. You effectively just vaporize the person on the other side who's receiving that. We want to limit that effectiveness like just a little bit, right?
Sure.
Because that playing against that, especially at a high level, is the amount of effort that it takes to counter that is significantly higher than the amount of effort to do it, if that makes sense.
It does. Whose turn is it here? Is it my turn? No, I definitely just went.
I think it is you.
Really?
Or maybe it is Drew.
No, it's actually Drew. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Take that glaive question there, Drew.
You can go first if you want.
Oh yeah? All right, fine.
Yeah.
Have glaives reached their peak in terms of potency after the recent rework? Given their niche playstyle, how would more powerful perks like chain reaction or chill clip be considered? How do they think they will perform going forward? Curious if they have any more changes planned out in the future.
I think at base for PvP, we think they probably are about as strong as we really want them to be, especially in the post-March update sandbox where they got their damage buffed a little bit. That being said, like that's the base glaive.
Yeah.
Putting perks on them like chain reaction, we actually might be able to do that in the future, because I want to say it's in the final shape, we are reducing the effectiveness of chain reaction on special weapons, but we're doing that so we can put it on more special weapons. Like we haven't been able to put chain reaction on a lot of special weapons because it's super strong.
Gotcha.
So we're going to reduce the effectiveness so we can start putting it on more special weapons, which is a pretty fun thing. So yeah, something like chain reaction might totally be possible on a glaive, and then we can kind of spice glaives up a little bit with perks like that. Chill clip, well, we don't have a legendary stasis glaive yet, so
Ayo. don't excite freaks in the chat like Jingleheimer. Don't encourage people like this, Merc.
I appreciate Jingle's Edge of Concurrence clips. Those are pretty good.
Yeah.
People sleep on how much damage it does, but it is like one of the highest damage single events that you can do in PvP.
Yeah. You know who doesn't appreciate those clips? Those poor bastards on Xbox Quick Play who Jingle's out there farming. That man is a menace to the bottom.
I tell you, I play against Jingle.
It looks insane.
I play against Jingle a fair bit because I'm also on Xbox. So
that's right. Yeah. Okay, Drew, you can jump in on that one there.
Sure. I feel like we kind of went over this question already. So do we want to hop over to the general weapon questions?
Sure. Take the reins.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we definitely
covered.
We did
pretty
cover
much
that.
everything.
Yeah.
Right. We covered that.
We
right?
did. Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
It was basically just the question about do the less the less performing weapons see any sort of a buff from the health thing, and we talked. You went over that, right?
Yeah. We're good. We're good.
Cool. All right. General weapon questions. A hand cannon or sidearm with cascade point? Question mark.
So we actually tried this. I tried with when we were working on malfeasance, the catalyst for malfeasance, my original idea was Cascade Point.
Really?
And we tried it, and it is super uncontrollable. It is legitimately uncontrollable. Like, it is unusable. And we put Desperado on a 120 hand cannon at one point in time, and like, it's just wildly uncontrollable. And I know everyone's like, well, the last word has a ton of custom tuning to make it like usable while you're doing that. So we think maybe long term it'd be pretty funny to put a rate of fire alternate perk on like a hand cannon or a sidearm. But short term, like, we can't just slap the existing perks on there and call it a day, because it's like pretty funny for a meme, but actually using it in game would be pretty darn near impossible.
Okay, so I'm just to clarify, you say uncontrollable, meaning like it's just literally so wild that like you wouldn't be able to. Okay, got it.
It's
so
literally like
context.
Yeah,
go for it.
It's literally like sending your aim like straight to the ceiling, like no matter what. So
that's
for
like
context, I experienced this outside of the crafting. Sometimes the last word can bug out where it loses seemingly the custom tuning, and it turns into like a completely different archetype and recoil pattern. It's like a 120 that quadruples the recoil, and it hits the damage value differently too. So I call it the protagonist last word whenever that bug happens. It's so funny.
Maybe
and even in the
we'll share a
crafting,
clip.
I remember experiencing it.
I'm so in the mindset of like, come on, bro, give it to us. Like, you're giving us a challenge right here. Like, oh, it's uncontrollable. I can feel like the defizzles, like the top level PvP players, like, try me, bro. Like, let's try, and I'll spend all weekend pulling that mouse down and trying to figure out the recoil pattern and yada yada.
Yeah.
During the crafting, I think Nerve had a clip of it. I would love to get it for you, but I know there's clips of it somewhere because he put
I definitely would have it too.
on it. Yeah, maybe Cam has it.
Classic.
So those were some crazy rumbles. We all had custom guns, but nothing like too crazy.
It's always hilarious to me that 99% of the community during the crafting was like, quick, like, make a broken Amit so we can finally go to the lighthouse. And like Cammy and Drew are like, oh, what if this gun had this perk? Like, you spend all of the crafting in a private lobby. It's just like the most Cammy and Drew thing I can think of.
We made our guns shoot straight.
Which is classic. It's just so funny.
I loved it. I just wanted to shoot straight.
I love it.
That's
dude.
all I wanted.
All right, but go ahead, Cammy.
Yeah, I feel like that next question feeds into exactly what we're already talking about, which is like, is the end goal to have deterministic recoil on all exotics, or at least the PvP ones like B-Wing? And then, are there any plans to retroactively add deterministic recoil patterns to old weapons, or only to weapons moving forward?
So honestly, we're still evaluating deterministic recoil and like how it's affecting the sandbox, and if it's something we want to continue to move forward with. Like right now, we plan to continue putting it on new legendary weapons and exotics as needed. We do not plan to go back and add it to other weapons unless we're 100% sure that it's going to be a benefit. Vigwing was a special case because for a while, the recoil pattern was set up in such a way because back in D2 year 1, you used to be able to put like counterbalance mods on your armor, right?
Yep.
So you could change the recoil direction of an exotic, which is something you can't really do
that was
right
a
now.
Cool feature.
So the recoil pattern has kind of like hampered the weapon. But when we changed the recoil direction stat, it just made it like way too easy to use, right? Because like it just made it vertical recoil for everyone. So instead what we did is we found a recoil pattern that is pretty close to what the natural recoil feels like, but with the randomness reduced, so you can learn the recoil pattern and you can get the effect of having a counterbalance mod just through the muscle memory of having shot the gun enough to understand how it works, right? So it kind of rewards players who put the skill in with Vigilance Wing. The gun will be really, really good for those players without being just like super strong for every single person who picks it up.
I'm super excited about that.
Are you able to talk about the general feeling on the experiment with deterministic recoil? Like, has it been received in general favorably, or is it maybe different per particular weapon?
We think it's been a mixed bag. Like, okay. I think the goal of deterministic recoil, or we think the goal of deterministic recoil is a valid one. And we do think that some players are seeing that, right? Like the deterministic recoil changes the way a gun feels, and it leads to experimentation with the recoil direction stat to try to find the best value. And then once you've like locked that in, you really feel like you can master the weapon, like you can learn it in a way that you couldn't really before. At the same time, it's not super easily surfaced to the player, right? And so it can kind of be confusing. Whereas all of our stats are generally just like more number better. All of a sudden, with recoil direction, it's not necessarily more number better anymore, right?
Right.
And so I think that's kind of hard to grasp from a player perspective. So we'll see. Like, we'll continue to investigate it. We'll continue to put it on more weapons and continue to listen to feedback, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
For visual examples, Cool Guy has been a really good resource for looking at that across all the new guns.
I would agree with that, yeah. Okay, next question on our list here. Are there any exotic weapons where catalysts have been made but not released due to the weapon already being too good?
Not since I have been at Bungie, and I asked Chris as well, since he's been there longer, and he said not been at Bungie. We do sometimes build the hooks, which is the internal talk for like the back-end investment setup for a catalyst. We build those like right when a gun is like an exotic is created, so that we don't have to go back and build them later. When we want to add a catalyst to it, we can just like add the catalyst to it, right? But usually we hide that stuff so it doesn't like get out, and so people don't see it. And I think a couple times we have forgotten to hide that, and so it looks like a gun has a catalyst, but we actually haven't built the catalyst. It's just like the investment setup is there to support a catalyst. And so people will like look in the API and be like, oh, this gun's got a catalyst. And it doesn't actually have a catalyst. We just forgot to hide that stuff before we like ship the weapon.
Got it.
So yeah. Yeah, the only catalyst that I've ever seen built was there was like an experimental malfeasance thing that was built years and years and years ago, I think back in like the Forsaken era, that didn't end up shipping for whatever reason. But I don't think it was because malfeasance was too strong. It just might have been the catalyst like functionally literally didn't work or something like that.
There's a myth in the community about a last word catalyst. It was something like high noon or something. I don't know if that's something to comment on, but I know that's like what everyone's speculating here. Wasn't there a guy or something that like got it on a gun, like literally in the game? I don't know if that's true or
I
not.
made a video about that. Yeah, a fellow reached out. Yes, a fellow reached out to me that he had it. We tried for hours to recreate it. He had somehow gotten, I think it was on the Dire Promise. He had an old Dire Promise, and somehow he was getting a perk active on his HUD called High Noon, and he was smoking people with it in PvP. And then we tried fiddling it with it together, and we changed up his build a little bit, and he lost it, and we were unable to get it back. And we were like trying to retrace his steps to like the T to bring it back, but we never could.
That is not a catalyst. I don't actually know what that is. I can investigate it, but no, it's not like a hidden the last word catalyst or anything like that. Sorry to shoot down the urban legend, which
Myth
gives people
busted.
hope. Yeah.
When in doubt, we blame Vicarious Visions. No.
Drew, I think you're next here.
Okay, so we have, is there a consideration of the OG checkmate primary weapon slower TTK being brought more into the base game? I feel like over the past few years, the primary weapon TTK has been faster and optimal TTK has been easier to hit.
So again, like a pretty prescient question. To address the latter part of the question first, like that's exactly what we were alluding to in the sandbox TWID. Like we have not made primary weapons kill faster, and on the most part we haven't made primary weapons more forgiving than they were in Forsaken, right? It's literally just players have played more with the weapons and have gotten them, and the average skill of the player has increased, and a much higher percentage of people can hit optimal TTKs now than they could before, compared to the player base as a whole. So that's one of the things that we were trying to address with the sandbox tuning. As for the original checkmate primary weapons and the slower time to kill, we are bringing checkmate back in the April update, and primary weapon times to kill are going to be tuned to be slower across the board. To answer the question directly, we are not currently interested in increasing optimal times to kill in the weapon sandbox. Not to say we would never do it, but no, that's not something that we're interested in doing right now. So
Okay, I think I'm ready to move on.
Go for it.
Will the element changes to the prophecy weapons be retroactive? Like, will the a sudden death shoddy change from arc to void with the update? Or will it be like the Nightshade Reprisal where the old versions are kinetic and the newest strand?
Well, these questions are easy. No, it's not going to be retroactive. So the new sudden death is going to be void, and the old one's going to be arc. So completely different weapon, basically.
Can I take this one, Fallout?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Is there any need for AE to remain in the game, and do you think it has been more damaging than helpful for the sandbox? I know some of us still don't like it. Is there any intent to reconsider it, especially now that airplay didn't explode like expected after Strand?
We've spoken about this before. I think we've specifically spoken about it on this podcast. But AE has always existed in some form in the game. It just wasn't a player-facing stat until we surfaced it, right? There has always been airborne effectiveness in some form, and prior to Forsaken, there was just no way you could modify it at all. It was just always like bad,
Secretly
basically.
there, yeah.
Yeah. So like if you jumped in the air pre-Forsaken, even in D1, your guns were just like wildly inaccurate comparatively. And in Forsaken, we introduced, Heat Rises and Icarus Grip, and those were the only two ways that you could increase your AE value behind the scenes. And because we only had two ways to increase the value, there was no reason for us to like build a whole stat around it, right? Because we only had two options. So now what we currently have with AE, if we were to remove AE, which we're taking to mean going back to the system before we surface the stat, right? We would be reducing accuracy in air by like 300% from what it is right now, right? Like we would be making your weapons way less accurate in the air than they are at base. Specifically things like Ace of Spades, Chaperone, exotics that couldn't get Icarus before would feel awful in the air. That being said, we hear the concerns about AE. We hear what people are talking about. What it really is the lack of aim assist. Like that's really what's going on. Like you jump in the air, your aim assist gets cut down by 75%. It's really hard to hit stuff, right? At 0 AE, you have like half the aim assist you had prior to us surfacing the system. And at 100 AE, you have like 110% or something like that. It's some value that's higher than what you could get before, right? So the ability is there to get that aim assist back, but it's just really hard to get up to that point, right? So what we're going to do is in the final shape, we've actually built a set of stackable helmet mods based off, I'm sure you guys remember there's one in the artifact like way back when, right? So we basically taken that mod, and instead of it just being a one-time mod, it's going to be a stackable mod that goes in the helmet. It gives you plus 15 AE for 1, plus 25 for 2, plus 30 for 3, right? So you'll be able to much more easily build into AE and get up into those values where you can start really feeling the aim assist like kick in if that's what you want to do, right? So it should be like trivial on most primary weapons to get 50 plus AE now compared to what it was before. Whereas right now, like it's still kind of hard to do that if you don't have a perk or a subclass ability or something that's giving it to you.
My desk is in shambles right now. I have a quote written down from you somewhere among the papers from the last time we had this discussion about AE, about the current value of the current AE being better than it was in the past with, do you please tell me, you can help me finish the mental puzzle in my brain right now.
Yeah, so I mean, like at your primary weapon, your primary hand cannon, your Rose, right?
Yeah.
If you have done nothing to it to get AE,
right,
it is more accurate than how accurate it was with Icarus before we surfaced the system.
That
like
is
without you even putting
down,
Icarus
yes.
on it, it is more accurate than it was with Icarus when you're in the air. The difference is that although it is more accurate, it has significantly less aim assist than it did prior, right? So the old AE system, the way it worked is that as soon as you jumped, your aim assist was cut in half, and it stayed that way no matter what. It stayed that way regardless of whether you had Heat Rises or whether you had Icarus. It was just always cut in half, right? And the airborne accuracy penalty that you got, it's like imagine your normal accuracy cone of the gun. When you jumped, it expanded like 3 times its normal size. So it got super inaccurate, but you still had half of your normal aim assist, right? So your accuracy cone expanded 3 times its normal size. Your aim assist got cut in half. That's still quite a bit of aim assist. We have pretty generous aim assist in this game. So even cutting it in half, that's still quite a bit of aim assist.
Yeah.
So then what you could do is when you put on Icarus, it shrank that cone that had expanded. So instead of it expanding 3 times its normal size, it expanded by like 25%, right? So instead of expanding by 300%, it expanded by like 25%, right?
Right.
And then you maintain the same amount of aim assist, which is 50% of your normal grounded aim assist. And then when you put on Heat Rises, instead of it expanding by, it expanded by 5%, right? So now, when you hit 60 AE on a primary weapon, your cone does not expand at all when you jump. Literally not at all. There is no expansion. You have the exact same accuracy that you have on the ground. The difference in this system is that although it is far more accurate at base, so like 0 AE in this game is the same accuracy cone expansion that you were getting from Icarus before. Right.
That is
so
what I
we've
had
cut
written
out
down.
all of that super low accuracy stuff. We've cut all of that out. That's all gone. It doesn't expand that much anymore when you jump. Even at 0 AE, when you jump up in the air, your accuracy cone hardly expands at all. Right. Instead, what we did is we said, okay, we're going to give him back accuracy, but at 0 AE, you only have 25% of your grounded aim assist, right?
Right.
So you used to have 50%, now you have 25%. And then up at 100 AE, you have, I don't know, 60% or whatever it is. It's some value more than what it was prior, right?
Sure.
So at 100 AE, you are better than anything you could have gotten before we surfaced the AE stat. Just like objectively across the board, your accuracy is better, your aim assist is better. You are literally better than you were with Heat Rises at 100 AE in the current system, right?
Right.
So that's why we say that. And so we're not entirely saying that AE is perfect as it is, because it's not. We wouldn't be adding the mod if we thought it was perfect, right?
Right.
But the scale that AE resides on right now is actually a pretty generous scale. Where at the high end, it's better than it ever was before. And at the low end, your accuracy is way better than it was before. We just cut your aim assist by like a substantial amount, right? So
Follow-up question on that. Because I mean, again, it's not that that Bungie was like, we're going to introduce this system. Like, it's been in the game since D1. It just hasn't been. What did you say? A player-facing stat is what you said.
yeah, so every time you've jumped from D1 on, you've
Right.
always had this system affecting you. No way to surface it as like a player-facing stat that you could modify.
Your microphone is playing fun
Sorry, your
games
mic cut out a
of peekaboo there, but
Oh, is it? No.
Yeah,
Better now?
His mic is over here. You just missed.
It's,
Like, yeah.
it's better now. But yeah, so the question I was going to ask was, ever since the introduction of it becoming a player-facing stat that you can, continually tweak and modify, you guys have been kind of making adjustments and tweaks here and there since that point. Any plans for further minor adjustments in the future? We've mentioned the cutting of the aim assist. Any internal discussions on possibly looking at the amount of aim assist being cut? And this is me basically, while you're speaking about the system, reading through the chat. And this is the players love their aim assist, Merc. Let me tell you from reading this chat. Any internal discussions on possibly continuing the system in the form of evaluating the number being cut or anything to that degree?
Yeah, but we're going to see how the mods shake out first, right? Because
Okay.
the goal of the system is not for you to be able to have 0 investment in it at all and be flying through the air with the greatest of ease like you're at the circus, right? Like that's not the purpose of the system. Like the purpose of the system is you invest in it, and if you invest in it, your reward is that you're better than you ever could have been before, especially if you're like a hunter or a titan, right? Like Heat Rises was only available on warlocks, right?
Mhm.
The goal was to provide that level of airborne gameplay to all players should they choose to invest in it, not to provide that level of airborne gameplay to all players with no investment. So I think it's possible that we reevaluate like the aim assist curve on that scale, but we're going to see how the mods, work. It might be
Question
that
on
you
those
slap a mod
mods.
on an Icarus and you're like, oh, I'm good to go. Like, it feels great now. So
Is the mod specific or generic?
they're
As in
generic.
like generic, so it would work for my hand cannon and my sniper at the same time?
It's literally just for everything. You put the
Okay,
mod on, you get
perfect.
plus 15 AE for everything.
That's amazing.
I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Mhm.
Any additional follow-up questions, boys, regarding that particular question?
Nope, think you hit it.
Okay.
If I had to comment on it, I would say even after the initial AE changes, I noticed like, oh my goodness, I can hit yellows with Hawkmoon in the air for the first time ever. So
Yeah,
I think he is spitting some facts.
So for people who couldn't access heat rises, people who are using weapons that couldn't benefit from Icarus, this system has been a flat out buff. Like there is no way to cut it where this system is like a nerf for those weapons. If we were to go back to the old scale, those weapons would feel like horrendous in the air, basically, because their accuracy cone was so massive that it didn't matter that you had more aim assist. Like you weren't going to hit anything with an accuracy cone that's blown out 300%. Like you're not hitting anything even with the aim assist. But when the accuracy cone was shrunk down to only be blown out 25%, like that amount of aim assist is going to make it to where you can still hit stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Okay, let's see. Where are we in the document here? Are there any more plans for aggressive burst hand cannons? Oh lord, especially for M and K players. Warden doesn't feel good as controller. I agree with this guy. Or are there new models coming? Talk to me.
I totally didn't submit that one.
So that was kind of a little bit of a snafu on our end. So we were experimenting with some stuff, and we've talked before that like mouse and keyboard has more aim assist than controller does, and we were doing some weird things, and somehow that like slipped onto this gun, and so it shipped with like 25% less aim assist than intended in hip fire and when airborne, which definitely contributed to it not feeling great. So we're going to fix that in the March update, which is good. And then in the final shape, we're also buffing the stability of the heavy burst archetype, just like in general. So we're going to make it more stable, which should also help, especially on mouse and keyboard. And then we've got 2 new heavy burst hand cannons coming in the final shape. And we also gave an intrinsic bonus to the heavy burst. Ooh, I hope the sniper doesn't kill me for saying this, but it's a pretty small thing anyways. But we gave an intrinsic bonus to the heavy burst frame, which reduces incoming flinch by a small amount too. So
interesting. Okay, yeah. Because I was reading all that stuff about like, oh yeah, we're gonna make it better with the hip fire and the airborne shooting, and I was like, what if it feels bad outside of that for me?
Well, that's what the changes in final shape are for.
Terrific.
All right, I think I know my new main weapon.
I mean, yeah, these boys, you guys are like addicted to anything that can reduce flinch. Like,
Yeah, like to take RNG out of the gunfight.
I completely understand. It's very annoying to get flinched.
Flinch hater, or hater.
Flinch hater
all the above.
confirmed. All right, Drew, take it.
Okay, so question here says, if you were given the green light to make an entirely new weapon or weapon type, it says example, dual wielding. I'm definitely not biased. What would it be, or what design obstacles would you have to overcome to get it off the ground?
I actually don't have that question on my sheet.
I was just saying, did you skip ahead? Where are you reading from?
No, I just typed that question in there.
I don't know. So I had to read that. What was the question?
Drew's going rogue.
I'm making up questions. Just pull stuff out.
I got a rogue question, but it's not this one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm waiting, but it's not this one.
He's going off the grid.
It didn't sound like something that I couldn't. It didn't sound like something that I couldn't answer. Well, it was.
Yeah.
If you were a hot dog,
I'm gonna simplify it. Okay. If you're given the green light to make an entirely new weapon or weapon type, what would it be, or what design obstacles would you have to overcome to get it off the ground?
An entirely new weapon or weapon type. I mean, geez, we have so many weapons like in the game already. Like, part of me feels like there's a little bit of space for a different type of melee weapon than what we've already got. Like we've got glaives and we've got swords, but I feel like there could be I don't know, something different as far as melees go, like a rain melee, basically like our I don't know, like nunchucks or something like that, right? No, not necessarily a spear, although that would be pretty funny. Like a boomerang or something like that, right? I don't know, but I think I would have to go with the low-hanging fruit, which is I have been dying for like a Halo 3 Mauler, which is like a handheld like sidearm that's a shotgun.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing. Like I think that would be
second fire mode.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that'd be pretty sweet if I was just like building something random. As far as what you have to navigate to do that, a lot. because it's not just like us building the gun in investment. You have to worry about hard surface, making the new gun model. You have to worry about animation. You have to worry about sound design, right? You have
That might cut out right there for me.
Might cut out.
I think the Bungie snipers hit him.
Oh Lord, the Bungie sniper back at it.
is my mic back.
Oh, you're
now?
back.
Good.
Oh, you're
That's
back,
good.
buddy. You're good. You're
Discord,
good.
how you gonna do me like that?
We thought we
Absolutely
lost
ridiculous.
you for a minute there.
In the middle of me going off about how difficult it is to make a new gun. So I don't remember what was the last thing I said. I think I said you have to worry about sound design or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of other things that are tied into making a weapon that aren't necessarily something that we can do by ourselves on weapons design. There's a whole host of teams that contribute to every single weapon that gets built, right? And so you got to think of all of their contingencies as well. And then in addition to that, you have to think about how it fits into the sandbox and how it's balanced, right? Like if you make a handheld shotgun, it obviously, you know, is it going to be primary ammo then? Because if it's special ammo, like, is that not just a rapid fire shotgun that looks different? You know, so it's probably primary ammo. So if it's primary ammo, can you let it one hit kill? Because if you let it one hit kill, it's probably too strong. So then it has to 2-hit kill. Well, if it 2-hit kills, you know, how fast do you want it to fire? Like there's like a whole cascading tree of stuff that you're going to have to think about when you make something like that. And generally what happens is you throw together a paper design and you're like, this is generally what I'm thinking about doing. And you get it in close enough, you know, good enough for government work basically. And then you just build something and you check it into the game and you start playing with it. And you play with it as a little like gray box where it looks just like a little gray pistol that's in your hand. And you run around and you do the thing and you see how it feels. And you kind of iterate from there. And it's a lot of iterations every single day, using it in playtest, iterating on it, changing it, improving it. Like that's kind of what Final Warning was. Like Final Warning was a gun that I just had in my head. I was like, man, wouldn't it be sweet to make, you know, like they're called like Whistling Birds in The Mandalorian, where he has like those rockets that are in his like gauntlet.
Yeah.
And he fires them out and they track all the targets that were around him.
Right.
And I was like, damn, it'd be sweet to make a gun that does that. So that's how Final Warning came about. And Final Warning took a ton of work to get it to a place where it was. And then it shipped. And I was like, man, you would think a gun that is an auto tracking gun would be like an easy to use gun for noobs, kind of like how Jotun is. But it ended up being like really hard to use and having like a pretty high skill ceiling. But it's so impossible to use that like most people just tried it once and were like, I don't understand how this thing works, and put it down. So it's kind of funny how that stuff ends up. But
that was a good answer. Where are we in the actual document? I scrolled all the way over trying to find the question that drew magically.
Sid drew the list of the real question list, and not the. I'm worried that he's going to read out one of those ones that's like. What are the ones that I see on Twitter?
Destiny 3. Okay. No, not that one.
I have a document here, and I thought we were all on the same one, but clearly not.
I mean, it's been it's been 20 out of 21 have been the same. So I don't know how that one slipped in there. Yeah.
We're on what's really funny because the next question is about hand cannon flinch, right? That's the next question. Great. Okay. Yeah. We doing that? Who's doing that?
I'll do it.
Do it for real, Drew.
Sure. Real question. With the adjustment to hand cannon flinch versus other players, are there any plans or internal discussion about reducing or removing primary versus primary flinch for all primary weapons? And it says here, except bows and primary GLs.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually something that we have been discussing internally. Not removing flinch entirely, but reducing it. We're interested in investigating how it would affect gameplay. Obviously, we've taken like one step in that direction with the reduction of hand cannon flinch that's provided to players. I wouldn't be surprised to see further investigations, but something more topical that I think y'all actually might be more excited about. We recently got some new tools in our sandbox, like not the game sandbox, but in our sandbox, that we're hoping will allow us to tune like sniper and LFR flinch better, right? Because they're at a weird place now where like if you get shot while you're using a sniper or a special LFR, like the camera just goes like wild and like shoots all the way upwards. But yet people are still able to shoot through that flinch like somewhat regularly, which is pretty frustrating. So we got some new tools in place. I'm actually going to be digging into them tomorrow, but we're really excited. We think it might enable us to to potentially, hopefully address that problem a little bit in a future patch, right? And make it so where it's not so easy for snipers and LFRs to kind of shoot through the what seems like a ridiculous amount of flinch that they're taking. So not on the subject of primary weapon flinch, but it is flinch related. So
yeah, I have like one. This is unrelated. Like one phantom question that you could shut down
God,
really,
he's going
really
rogue
quickly.
again. All right.
I'm doing it. This is why I didn't want to go
going
rogue
off the
earlier. I
beaten
swear I wasn't
path.
going rogue. I'm going rogue now. What does fanfire on the last word do? Do you have that? If you don't have it handy, you can just say like, don't know off the top of your head.
I don't have that handy. I mean, doesn't it do what the perk says it does, where it like greatly increases the accuracy and aim assist when you deal damage?
I don't know. I always wonder like what it's actually doing. Like it feels like it does something, but I've always wondered like, what does it do?
Not having the investment data in front of me, I would guess that it probably changes the precision. It probably does do exactly what it says it does. It probably increases accuracy and it probably increases aim assist, and it probably increases the precision angle threshold, which is something that's normally set to like 0 when you're hip firing. We've talked about that with AE before, but basically, when you're in like a non-optimal firing state, the aim assist will give you a body shot if you're off target, but it won't give you a headshot. It will be like, you weren't actually pointed at the head. You don't get a headshot for this, but you were within the aim assist cone, so we're going to give you a body shot. When you hip fire, that value is always by default set to 0, unless you have a perk like hip fire grip or like freehand grip or like offhand strike or like the BXR battler perk that changes that value, right? So the only way you hit a headshot when you're hip firing is if you are directly on the head. Based on me using the last word, my assumption would be that it changes that value and opens that value up. So it effectively makes the aim assist more likely to give you crits.
Nope. Thanks.
Are we satisfied with our off path?
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Yeah. All right. Next question we have written down here. Have they ever thought of reducing the potency of opening shot on special weapons? Oh, I hate this. As currently they feel mandatory on any one-hit kill weapon that can roll with it. Most especially snipers and pellet shotguns. I've been dreading the potential answer to this question for a long time now.
Why, do you like opening shot?
Just bear shit in the woods.
Not only have we thought about it, we'd already done it. Like opening shot gets 50% of the benefits on special weapons, right? So it's already, greatly reduced on special weapons compared to how it is on primary weapons. Maybe even with that, it's still too strong, but we kind of think that we could hit it a small amount. Don't really think we want to hit it a ton. Probably the bigger concern is there's really just like a distinct lack of competition in that slot for those type of weapons, right? Like there's nothing really better than opening shot in the same trait slot that opening shot rolls in for snipers or shotguns. So it's like, why would you pick anything else when you have opening shot? And so the way we end up addressing this might be twofold. We might nerf it a little bit just to like bring it more in line with other stuff, but maybe we'll also build a perk that competes with it in that slot. And, maybe that's the way we address it.
Man, that would have to be some hella good competition, brother. I'd be like, oh, you put on this perk, gives you like extra aim assist, a little bit of range, and leaves a $20 bill under your pillow every night. Like I'm trying to think of what kind of perk on paper would be able to compete.
What do you guys value on shotguns and snipers, right? Like a lot of it's like cracked handling, and you're pretty reliant on left column perks for that stuff, threat detector, snapshot sights. So what if we gave you a right column perk that gave you 50% of the range benefits of opening shot, but it also gave you a crazy amount of handling that meant you were no longer, reliant on those left column perks? Like there are ways it can be done, right? It's just finding the right combination of things that players care about on those weapon types, and turning the thumb screws a little bit.
That makes sense.
To answer your question on that, Fallout, like what we would take over opening shot, I think high impact reserves on some archetypes is really good on snipers. And then mulligan's also pretty good. And then I think the damage perks are nerfed with the plus 30 health, so those don't really apply anymore.
Yeah, and damage perks have never been super optimal, but we also tried with barrel constrictor. I don't know that that's going to move the needle on it, but barrel constrictor is like super cracked now after you get a kill. But what did we say? When you lock stuff behind a kill trigger, right? For a lot of
Right,
players
right.
in PvP, it's not necessarily the thing, but it is way better than opening shot for a pretty long period of time after you get a kill. So
How effective do you assume like it is? Because like, can you really like visually tell based on like when you shoot a wall per se, or is that like truthful information?
it's close enough, right? Like those are decals that get applied to the wall in like the general area of where the pellets hit. So like yeah, it's close enough, but I think I want to say it's like a 20% decrease in pellet spread. So it's substantial.
All right, Fallout. There was a second
I'm gonna
perk
give it a
back in
try.
the day. 1-2 punch to kill the bubbles. At some point, PvE got that nerfed.
That is true.
Yeah, that's very sad.
But now we
Oh,
don't
man.
need
That's
one-two
very
punch
sad.
anymore to kill bubble titans.
We got conditional,
we got
baby.
conditional, bro.
I mean, like, I guess.
Sure do.
You sure do.
Sure do.
Jesus, where were we?
We're on game mode and map questions.
Wonderful.
The first of which is, can we get more party type game modes?
Who
I played
submitted
so much
this?
Sparrow Control
Who
yesterday.
submitted this question?
So the answer is yeah, and like it's not like you get more party modes, which means you don't get more core modes, right? Like we have Collision coming out, and actually I think next week we have Collision coming out and going into labs, which is a mode that I personally really enjoy. I think it's a very, very fun mode. It was like purpose built for threes and for comp and stuff, and it's quite enjoyable. It's a super different take on an objective, even though it's still, zones. It's like a different take on an objective than what we have. It's a lot more mobile than a lot of our other objective modes, right? So it's pretty fun. As far as party game modes, like, yeah, I think we said it in the TWID, but the goal is kind of to continue to experiment with things that are interesting, different takes on the Destiny sandbox, because we think that there's a lot of fun to be had there. Some people really love Momentum. Some people have really been enjoying Relic. Momentum is always super popular. Mayhem, some people love. Momentum is always super popular. And like Hardware is the next one that we have coming out, which Hardware has been something that people have asked for a long time.
I am looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hardware is a really interesting take on Destiny's sandbox. It's very, very different than normal Destiny. And I think some people will really like it, and some people will be like, this isn't really my cup of tea. But the goal is to kind of have a lot of those modifiers in the game and to start putting them all into private matches so that you can apply those modifiers to any game mode if you're choosing in private matches and kind of play with your friends and mess around with stuff. Like even Checkmate's weapon tuning is going to be a modifier that's going to be in private matches I think in the final shape. So you can like apply Checkmate, just the weapon tuning. You can apply Checkmate to any game mode you want. And then you can pick which ammo system you want to go along with it. You can pick respawn with ammo. You can pick ammo crates. You can pick the meter system, right? So there's going to be a lot more options. And I think we're going to continue to experiment on both sides of this coin. We're going to try to make cool new party modes that are pretty fun, that people can kind of goof around in. And we're going to continue to make really good core game modes that are there for the players who want to, who want something a little bit more serious. So
That sounds incredible. One step
That sounds
closer
really
to the
awesome.
MLG rule set.
I was gonna say one step closer to Forge mode. All right. Drew, you want to take this one?
Sure. I feel like you kind of mentioned this in
You
a
sort
way,
of
but
did, yeah.
it says if hardware is a success, is it possible to make it a core playlist? Will movement mechanics such as Icarus Dash, Dodge, and Titan Shield Bash still be available to use?
So it won't end up being a core mode where like it's available all the time, like Control is. But it would end up, if it were successful, it could end up being something like what Momentum and Mayhem are, where they like cycle through pretty regularly into the main PvP. The only abilities that you can use are your powered jumps. No Icarus Dash, no Dodge, no Shield Bash. It's just power jumps. That's it.
Oh,
Stab me in the heart with a knife, Mark. It
Did
makes
want-
sense. No,
Wait,
no, because
yeah.
then everybody would be Icarus dashing.
Yes.
No, and Scorched that
Yeah,
hit
you're
differently when I
right,
was
you're
just like, dude,
right.
you just shatter dived. It's not fair.
Yeah, that's fair. It makes more sense of what hardware is supposed to be, I'm assuming, at its core, or why it was made to begin with. Okay, let's do. Next up, we have a question that says, I know the Crucible can never have a, quote, perfect form to the player base at large, but what direction is the strike team pulling toward in terms of overall balance and how the Crucible should feel?
So our goal on the strike team is pretty much what we said in the TWID, which is we want Crucible to be rewarding for the players who want to play it, and we want to provide a variety of experiences so that there's always something in Crucible that's fun to play for those type of players. And we've mentioned before that like we are angling ourselves to provide a better experience for like the dedicated PvP players. And I think a lot of players kind of take that in their heads and they're like, oh, that means like the high skill players exclusively are like one specific cohort of players. But there's actually dedicated players who play a bunch of different stuff. There's dedicated Scorched players who just play a ton of Scorched, like a really absurd amount of hours of Scorched, right? Like there are dedicated players all the way across the spectrum who play everything from the super goofy game modes to the sweatiest of Trials players, right? And it's those players, all of those players, that we're kind of angling towards making Crucible a fun place. So yeah, I mean, it's a variety of experiences, and it's making it rewarding to play. And some of that reward is intrinsic reward by making the sandbox better and more fun, and rewarding you for improving at the game. And some of that reward is external rewards by just giving you more Ingrams or more guns or more Glimmer or something like that. So.
Oh, I don't know. I think I really like this next question.
Take it.
Are there
Take it.
plans for a
Yep.
big team battle like PvP experience in Destiny?
So we're investigating it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we actually are investigating it. It's an ongoing, active investigation at Bungie. There is some really weird tech stuff that happens when a bunch of players load into an activity in Destiny. I'm sure you guys are aware of that from like the big team raid strikes
12-man raid,
bug
let's
thing that went
go!
on. Yeah, but it is something we are actively investigating. We want to
Yeah.
make sure that we can make it happen in a way that ends up being fun and stable. Like the stable part is pretty
Stable
important.
being
but-
key.
Yeah,
I can't
but-
explain it, man. I know that like big team battle is just often like a big goofball fest. I am strangely drawn to it. Like I love. I played a ton of comp in the past like 2 weeks. Really, very much enjoying it. I love Trials. I very much take the serious PvP experience over like the let's go play Scorched or something like that. I cannot explain. I love big team battle. I love the thought of that somehow existing in the world of Destiny.
So there's something that happens where the more players are in a game, the less each person's individual contribution is necessarily like required for success. And like so the more people in the game, the less stressful the game can be, right? And I
Makes
think that
sense.
there's something to be said. The game feels a lot more like a playground or a sandbox when
Yeah.
it's 8v8 or something than it does when it's 3v3 or 2v2 or 1v1. So like as you decrease the amount of players in a game, the experience can get more stressful because more of a percentage of the team's success relies on an individual player's shoulders. When you increase the amount of players in a game, it decreases that amount to a very small amount, and you can functionally like kind of just goof off and have fun. And I think that's why Halo Big Team Battles was so successful, and
So fun.
we think it'd be something really, really fun, if we can do it in Destiny, but we got to make sure that we can do it first.
Right.
So
that
then,
that
on
makes
that
sense.
same note, will the upcoming announced maps vary in size, like Javelin versus Disjunction versus Cauldron? Do you know if the new PvP maps will have their own playlist at launch, or will they be weighted separately from the current pool?
So can't answer the second part of that question. But the first part of the question about the map size, they are all about Javelin 4 sized. So these maps were built with a focus on 3v3 game modes, and they will be available in like the control playlist, right? And at least one of them in particular, we really think is going to be like very, very good map, even for sixes. But these maps were designed to be 3v3 maps. So none of them are super teeny tiny like Exodus Blue. They're all about Javelin 4 sized. So like medium to
Nice.
medium small maps, as opposed to like small or extra small maps. That being said, on the maps, there are a variety of sightline distances. So it's not like, oh, this is SMG is the map, right? Like we have gone through
SMG is the
and
map.
really, yeah, we have gone through and really like messed with the geometry a ton. Even, you know, up until recently, we've been working a lot on the geometry of the maps to make sure that there's a variety of engagement distances. And so we didn't want to do something that was like disjunction, where it's like scout rifles and bows on the outside. But we also didn't want to do something where it's like anomaly, where it's just like, you know, abilities and SMGs and shotguns and nothing else. So
Right.
we tried really hard to find the middle ground there, where you can use a pulse rifle, you can use a hand cannon, you can use an auto rifle, you can use any of that stuff, and feel like there's a place for you to play.
That's a good answer. I like that answer.
Awesome.
Here's one that says, why are there so many nodes and matchmaking parameters in Crucible?
So this goes back to what we said in the twit and what I said earlier, but like there really isn't a one size fits all strategy that's going to make PvP fun for everyone. A good example of this, like it might be hard to tell from a player perspective, but over the last year or so, since like maybe season 19 or season 18, we've actually been experimenting a lot with like the layout of the Crucible and matchmaking and stuff like that. Like, you've probably seen that, like, oh, it feels like every couple updates we like change something or tweak something, right? And like we moved a bunch of playlists around and we renamed a bunch of playlists and we combined some playlists and we got rid of some playlists and we brought some playlists back. And all of that was experimentation to try to really find like the optimal mixture for PvP. And what we found is that, as an example, like merging the Clash and Control playlist into one playlist, which we called Quick Play. And we were thinking like, oh, well, you know, you've got 100,000 people playing Control and 50,000 people playing Clash. You put those two together, you get one playlist with 150,000 people in it. And everyone's happier because they find games faster, connections are better. Well, it turns out that those playlists form a Venn diagram, and the center part of the Venn diagram where people like both Control and Clash is much smaller than the sum of the two parts, right? So we combine those two, and what we actually found is that the people who don't want to play both just stop playing. Right? Like when we got rid of Rumble, we were like, oh, well, if we get rid of Rumble, those people will play Control. They don't play Control, they just stop playing. So like, yeah, maybe 10% of those players go into the main playlist, but that was kind of what happened. So we've, through all this experimentation, we've kind of found a good allotment of playlists that give us a variety of experiences for the player. You've got Control and Iron Banner with Outlier Protection. You've got a 3v3 and a 6v6 quick play playlist. You've got Rumble. You've got Competitive. Each one of those offers something different than the other ones. And then, of course, we have Crucible Labs. And long term, the goal is kind of to make it so there's not as much overlap, so the playlists aren't competing with each other in terms of experiences. So for the players who want the experience, there's always a place for them to go and find it. And we don't end up hurting ourselves by having two playlists that have like a similar experience, and then we split the population between the two, if that makes sense. And it's the same thing with matchmaking. Not everyone likes skill-based matchmaking. Not everyone likes connection-based matchmaking. When every playlist is one or the other, some players are not going to want to play. So the best thing we can do is put Outlier Protection into Control and Iron Banner. And for players who want that, they can go play there. And we also are going to offer open skill matchmaking, you know, CBMM, as you guys know it, open skill matchmaking in Quick Play, and open skill matchmaking in Rumble, and open skill matchmaking in the Trials Challenger pool. And that experience is there for those players who want it. Sorry, I feel like that was a long answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, the long answers are appreciated.
Spot on.
It's better than a short answer. I think we already covered this next one regarding private game mode options and stuff like that. So from here on out, it's all regarding matchmaking. Everybody's favorite discussion topic that no one ever gets upset about. I'll just keep going down the list here. What factors go into deciding a person's skill bracket?
Pretty much everything that's on the scoreboard goes into deciding a person's skill bracket. So kills, assist, deaths, objectives, revives, pretty much anything that's on the scoreboard gets all combined at the end of the game to like a total sum behind the scenes. And then that gets basically like stack ranked against every other player that's in the game. And it shows like where you where you fell. Like if there's 12 players in the game and you were the 6th highest ranked player coming into the game and you were the highest scored player in the game, like your skill is going to go up because it's like, oh, wow, you overperformed. Right. Whereas if you're the 1st highest ranked player and you were 12th, it's going to be like, oh, wow, you really underperformed. Your skill is going to go down. and it does that across, a great many games. Now our skill is tracked by like playlist bundle. So like your comp skill is only for comp. There are no other playlists that affect your comp skill, right? So just because you do really well in control doesn't mean your games are going to be harder and competitive.
I see.
And yeah, so we isolate those things so you're not punished for like doing really well in a social playlist, which then makes your ranked experience harder or something like that. Although your ranked experience just goes off your rank except for placement matches, so that doesn't really matter anyways.
So you're telling me that when Iron Banner Fortress comes back, I should destroy less turrets?
I
made Drew laugh. Count it.
Technically, if that counts as an objective for the purposes of like what is being tracked in that, which I'm sure it does because it's on the scoreboard, then yeah, I mean that counts as an objective thing. So if you want to kill less turrets to try to tank your skill, then you're more than welcome to try to do that.
Bingo.
Are there any non-visible factors, heat maps, etc.?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think in the skill system we're using right now, which is Skill Z, I don't think that there are. I think all of the factors that could be contributed to are visible. Yeah, I think they're all visible. We had another skill system for a while that had some other stuff in it, but I only learned about that when I was here in like 2018 and I was talking to one of the engineers about it, and I don't know if I don't think we use that for anything anymore. I think everything we do is run through Skill Z now.
Okay, I didn't know they used Dragon Ball as the, naming.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay, I'll take the next one then.
Please do.
Why are you guys doubling down? I don't know why I'm reading this like I'm mad. I'm mad for the person writing the question. Why are you guys doubling down on fire team-based matchmaking when the player data shows trios is significantly lower player count-wise?
We think we explained this pretty well in the TWID, but just to like go over it again, like, yeah, we are aware that trios is suffering population-wise. And we have taken steps to alleviate that by making trios exclusively more rewarding and not tying those to win outcomes, right? So you can go into trios with a couple of buddies and you could lose 100 out of 100 games and you're still going to be rolling in trials, Ingrams, and weapons and experience by the time you're done with that, right? And we also made 2 passage changes, like pretty serious passage changes, where losses are just generally like less punishing now, so that you can play with friends of mixed skills. And if you lose, it's like, oh, well, I'm still making progress on all this stuff, right? So that being said, like while the data shows that trios population is decreased, trios still have the highest flawless percentages of any fire team configuration. It just on average takes them more games, but they still go flawless more than duos percentage-wise and more than solos. And in addition to that, the other metrics that are not trio specific are much, much better, much healthier for trials right now. We're experiencing far less skill creep over the course of seasons. We are seeing less of like a player drop off over the course of seasons. And a lot of that is because the solo and duo queue experiences exist and players can fall back onto those, right? The nice thing about being in solo or duo queue is that it's not a guarantee that you're matching up against, anything. You might get a really good player on your team or on the other team, but if you play enough, you can kind of get lucky. If we were to remove fire team-based matchmaking, short term, it would be an improvement for trios, right? But long term, it would likely harm everyone's experience and would kind of cause the trials ecosystem to deteriorate. And we know this because we've done this in the past before. Solo and duo players do not show a willingness to stick around when they are being placed into matches that they're basically guaranteed to lose just by favor of being a smaller fire team, right? And it really doesn't matter how much rewards we give them. It doesn't keep them in the playlist long term. It might keep them in the playlist short term, but once the duos and solos start to bleed out of the playlist, the lower skilled trios can't really compete anymore because they were relying on playing smaller fire teams to win their games. And so now the lower skilled trios are matching higher skilled trios, and the lower skilled trios can't compete, and they start to drop out too because there's no solo or duo experience to fall down to, right? So they start to bleed out, and then the trios experience ends up pretty much right back where it is now. But there's the added negative of there's nowhere else to go to escape it. Like there's just the trios. And that's what Trials has done twice in the past before when we did that. So yes, like we understand the trios experience is not optimal, and we are working to try to improve the trios experience and make it better. But removing Fireteam based matchmaking is not the solution to that, because like I said, short term it would benefit, and then long term we would end up exactly where we've been in the past, which is the situation in Trials has, the vibes have deteriorated basically.
I think it's an interesting idea, trying to lean into making trios more rewarding. Cause I thought that was a nice touch. Cause yeah, I definitely don't play a lot of trios these days. It's just
and I mean, I see Defizzle even said in the chat, like duos being removed would guarantee trios growing, and it would, but not by very much. We saw this during freelance weekends where duos were not protected. Like duos were matched against trios, and solos were completely isolated by themselves, right? Like that's effectively removing duos, because going in as a duo is basically like suicide unless you were super, super stacked, right? And then it was just a challenge. What actually ended up happening is only like maybe a fifth of the people like became trios. Most of them just went to become duos. So the trios population went from like, at the time it was like 20%, and it became like 24%, right? And the solos population went up by like 20%. So the vast majority of players, if we remove duos, they're not going to become trios, and the ones that are going to be pretty highly skilled players.
For clarity of the recording, he typoed when he said that, but continue.
We'll edit that out so he looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh, good. I mean, it's a valid thing. Like we see that a lot. Like that is legitimately probably the most requested thing that we see about Trials is like just remove duos, and removing duos will make trios feel better. And it really won't make trios feel better, because the people who come up to trios are going to be good. So it's not going to like inflate the player pool in a way that is meaningful. And the best way to play Trials, if duos goes away for most players, is going to be solo, which is not with any friends at all. And so it feels like that's the worst of two evils, where like at least now if you can't play trio, you can play duo with one friend. And it feels like saying like your only options are trios or solo is moving in the wrong direction, so to speak.
He wanted to clarify in chat. He said, I meant that it wouldn't. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. Defizzle's a good dude.
Yeah,
I just happened to catch his name as it was scrolling up the thing, and it said the thing, and I was like, oh, I can address that, because I see that a lot. You would not believe the amount of DMs that I get on Twitter telling me to do that. And I was like,
right.
At the time, nobody even knew I worked on the strike team. They were just telling me it anyways, even though they thought I was a weapons designer. So
who's up next here with these questions here?
I'll take the next one, I guess.
Sure.
It says, in comp, I recently ran into an Ascendant player with a KD under 1.0, and I'm wondering, can you explain how it is possible that a player who goes negative can be that high of a rank?
I feel like that question could be
that's an interesting
perceived either direction.
So, like, there are going to be two different answers to this. One of them is that we originally had an anti-carry mechanic built into ranked, which was that if your skill was way below your rank, it was going to start decreasing the amount of points you would get for wins. And that was designed basically to prevent people from being carried to a high rank. Because if you weren't performing, if you weren't, contributing enough to these victories, like it was not going to give you enough points to where you could rank up. And players didn't like that. They said it felt unfair, like it was stifling their progress. Like they wanted it to really just be more focused on wins and losses. So we removed that system. So now, regardless of your skill, if you win enough, you will move upwards in rank, right? And you could do that by playing with someone who's significantly better than you, who basically, is able to carry you upwards. The second thing is, just because someone has below 1.0 and comp does not make them a bad player. If the player is in Ascendant and exclusively matching other Ascendant players, you're not going to expect them to have a very high KD, because they're matching other very good players, right? So an Ascendant player playing at Ascendant and getting a 0.9 is still probably likely better than someone who's playing at Silver and has like a 1.5, right? Because the caliber of opponent that they're facing is much higher than at other places. So KD, especially in comp, isn't really a great indicator of skill, because comp is about winning, and if the way you win is by playing the objective or getting assists, and that doesn't necessarily contribute directly to kills, like that doesn't mean you're a bad player. It just means you're playing to win, and you might sacrifice your KD a little bit to do that.
You taking like PR classes, man? You're getting like Deej level good at like talking. Like you're on the fucking ball, dude. Like it's like
I just get lectured a lot for saying the wrong things, and I actually try to learn from my mistakes.
get yelled at enough. This man
That-
is coming out with these public speeches. God.
That was a great example at the end, though. The
Can't
caliber
trip
of
'em up.
players you face. Like, I think that's pretty real. Like, even if you look at like, I know this is like the top of level of competition, but in like actual like, tournaments for some games, it's like they're, one KD is like.
You
Wow.
hear it in the announcer's voice
Yeah.
when they're going through the stats, the stat analyst. They go, "Oh man, he's popping off today. He has a 1.1."
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also,
So
you
I guess
mentioned
sort of relative.
playing the objective. Yeah. What is that? What is that word that you used?
Yeah, I know that
I'm a streamer, so
some people don't like objectives in Destiny, but like objectives are kind of a core part of like a competitive game, right? Because like there is Slayer skill, but there's also a lot of other skills to go into being good at a game. There's map awareness, the ability to manipulate spawns. There's knowledge of when to push with your teammates, when to fall back, positioning. Like there's a whole host of other things outside of just the ability to slay out that don't get as much like face time when we don't offer objective modes, right? And so moving forward, we do want to keep objective modes in the game in one way or another.
Right.
And we tried it with Rift, and obviously Rift wasn't super well liked. I thought Rift had some good stuff about it, but there were some issues that it had. And we tried it with Countdown Rush, and we'll try it with Collision, and we'll continue to iterate on all that stuff. But objective modes are a good thing, especially for a competitive environment. It's good to have stuff that's not just straight Slayer. Which I say that, and now that I've said that, I'm worried that might be a super controversial take, but
how dare you?
yeah.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I like the OBJ mode.
That's not.
I like
might
the
be-
objective. Yes, I like the
Didn't
idea
you just
of.
play a ton of comp
I
Fallout?
played a
like,
ton of comp, man.
Yeah. I mean, how was your experience? Saying honestly, I'm maybe walking myself into a can of worms here, but like, how was the experience? in
No,
comp?
honestly, okay, this is an interesting detour. YouTube video coming next week. I played 24 hours of comp. Here's what happened. But in a nutshell, I actually had a much better time playing than I thought I would. Honestly, I am goddamned amazed at the number of players in comp who don't look at the scoreboard and run into an engagement when their team already has the win and there's like 4 seconds left on the clock. I cannot tell you how many wins, guaranteed wins, have been thrown into the trash because we're up like 2-0, 3-0. Like, it's just like, and like they're pushing in with like 20, 25 seconds left. It's like, what are you doing? Like, I want to reiterate that I had a great time playing comp. I did hit Ascendant, which was very fun. Yeah, shocked, amazed, bamboozled by the amount of people who simply would be so much higher rank if they just looked at the scoreboard.
Yeah. Man,
but,
it's game sense, right? Like game sense is a real thing, and
Yeah.
you can have super great thumb skill or arm skill if you're mouse and keyboard and be really good at slaying out, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have great game sense. And like that's what elevates some players above other players. It's like the ability to read a situation and react accordingly.
I would legit recommend, I'm not even kidding, because before going into comp, it was my experience in PvP currently is just the pie chart is like, control or trials. It's just those two things. If it's the weekend, I'm gonna play trials. If it's just not the weekend, just dick around and play control, right? I was just like, comp, whatever. I got a god roll rose. Who gives a shit, right? Like, I'm not gonna go in. But I legit would actually recommend that people try, if you haven't played comp in a while, that you at least try it out. For not only for the rewards, but again, I shockingly had a very good time. It was a positive experience, which I honestly was not expecting.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work on comp recently, comparatively, and like
Yeah.
not everything. I'm sure not everything's a hit for everyone. but like we've been trying really hard to make comp into a like better ladder experience. And part of that was making a change to rank-based matchmaking, and part of that was updating game modes and rules, and we're continuing to experiment. And like, we just tested out 3v3 Clash in labs, and now we're putting it into quick play, and we're popping collision into labs, and like we're definitely putting a focus on some of those 3v3 modes with a goal of like improving the comp experience and making it something that's actually like fun and rewarding to play. So
sure. Drew went rogue one time. I'm gonna go rogue one time, just the one time.
I know.
Please, it's just, you don't even have to say anything. You can just sit there and smile and nod, like like Mona Lisa or something like that. Like, more whoever's in charge, because I know this isn't you, so it's just message in a bottle, right? Whoever's in charge of getting more unique, cool, badass emblems into comp, do that. I like that. Like, I really enjoy like unlocking that emblem and like putting it on. It's an awesome feeling. Like, I'll chase that high, bro. Like, I'll keep doing that. Like, just get.
I can make one. I can make like a PNG in Paint. It's like Fallout is cool written in crayon.
Literally do that. I will main it. I don't care how shitty it looks. Just like, like you drew it with your left foot. Like, just more emblems in comp. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That was
All right,
so
I'll
obscure.
pass on
Drew
that.
with your left foot.
All right, who's next here? I'll take it. Why not? Next question. A couple times mentioned is a snake draft as far as matchmaking. Can you explain what that means for matchmaking for those who don't know? Whoever submitted this doesn't play fantasy football.
Yeah, so snake draft is basically like what you would do if you were out at recess at school and like trying to form two teams for like football or kickball or something, right? Like each team gets a captain, and then the two teams go back and forth picking players. The difference for snake draft is that like the best player gets put on team A, and then the second and third best players get put on team B, then the fourth and fifth, the sixth and seventh, the eighth and ninth, the 10th and 11th, the 12th, right? So it goes back and forth, because obviously if it just went 1, 2, 3, 4, like one team would be skewed higher than the other.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what snake drafting is. And so what it does is it allocates the available skills more evenly between the two teams, compared to something like skill averaging. Skill averaging literally tries to make the average skill of each team the same. And that's the thing that I think a lot of high skill and low skill players are frustrated with, because what it'll do is it'll be like, oh, there's 2 good players. We're going to put these 2 good players on a team, and then we're going to give them the 4 worst players in the game. And that makes their average skill the same as 6 average players. But what actually ends up happening is that you have 4 players on your team who are worse than all 6 players on the other team, and they're just getting stomped, and it's up to the 2 players at the top to try to carry like the weight of that team. And so that's what average skill does. Like numerically, those 2 teams might be even, but the actual gameplay experience isn't always necessarily the best. So what snake draft tries to do is it tries to say, hey, we care less about the average skill and more about making sure that there's always like someone better than you and someone worse than you on the other team, so that you don't end up getting like, wow, I'm worse than literally all 6 players on that team. Like, that feels really bad, unless you're the worst player in the lobby, in which case, like, that's always going to be the way it is. But, for everyone else, it's a little bit more even.
Sure.
I think we have one final question on this matchmaking, and that might be the last question, period.
One final planned question before we awkwardly probe Merc with what he can get away with on the mic.
Which it reads, can you clarify what is meant exactly by this example below with some numerical examples? Unless I missed it last week, this was glossed over a bit, and the example is updated competitive matchmaking to be rank-based. In update 7.3.5, we will also cap the win and loss min-max values to make them less variable, which should make point rewards more predictable.
Yeah, I will answer that question. I did see in chat that someone was complaining about the lobby balancing in trials. There is no lobby balancing in trials. It's just completely random. Like, trials lobby balancing is literally just random. It just randomly sorts the teams when you get into a game. And so, like, the game's not trying to screw you. It's just RNG is a fickle mistress, right? And sometimes it's just really unlucky in the way it works. And like, that is, I think, the only place in the game in our PvP where there is literally no lobby balancing is trials. So trials is, trials. It's a special thing. So it doesn't have any lobby balancing. But everywhere else in the game, we're experimenting with snake draft or some iteration of it to try to, come up with a good system that checks all our boxes. But to this question, which is, can you explain what it means by capping the win and loss min max values? So right now, when you finish a game of comp, the amount of points that can be rewarded is like really widely variable. It's between 5 points, which is the minimum, and I want to say it's like 250 or 275 points is the maximum. So there's a super wide delta of points that you can get, and the things that change how many points you get are you below your expected rank? So like, does your skill say you're like an ascendant player, but you're playing in platinum right now? It'll say, okay, we expect you to be higher than this, so we're going to accelerate you out of these ranks. So in that case, you'll lose less on a loss, and you'll gain more on a win. That's one modifier. The second modifier is, was the other team significantly better, significantly worse than like your team, right? And that's to say, like, okay, because we have rank-based matchmaking, it's now possible for like really good players to be playing at like platinum against players who are much worse than them, because that's what their rank is. Their rank is platinum, but they're much better than platinum. So they're playing at platinum. So they could like destroy a team of actual platinum players. So we know that that feels bad. So if you lose to a team that's like way better than you, it decreases how many points you lose. And simultaneously on the other side, if you beat a team that's way better than you, it's going to give you a ton of points, because it's like, congratulations, you beat a team that was way better than you. But those values were swinging so wildly because the minimum was 5 and the maximum was 250 something. So it was making it feel really unpredictable how many points you were going to get at the end of the game. So we've just compressed those values. Like, we've compressed that scale a little bit. And we didn't do it a ton at first because we wanted to make this change and see how it plays. So I think the value now is like 50 to 200, right? So it's like a relatively small compression, but it is a compression. So hopefully it makes the point values that you get at the end of games feel a little bit more predictable, and a little bit less like, why did I get 17 points for that game and 247 points for another one, right? So hopefully it doesn't feel quite like that anymore. But it's something that we're going to continue to iterate on once this change goes live and we get some feedback on it.
Good call. So yeah, that is the end of the pre-arranged, pre-discussed question list that we have from community submitted questions. So first of all, thank you, Merc, because really appreciate all the discussion. All those answers were pretty detailed and lengthy. Good job, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Bungie, for trusting Merc to come down here again.
Definitely.
It would be great if Merc was like, oh, they don't know I'm here.
I snuck out late at night. I waited for them all to go to bed and I hopped on the podcast.
Chris Proctor looking at his phone. He's doing what? Is there anything that you did not get a chance to talk about that you have the authority to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we actually covered pretty much all the questions that were in the little list.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much good.
I wanted to ask if you can talk about collision more. It felt like confusing in the explanation. And that's why I got that a lot today. Yeah. So you can just go off of what you can say.
So collision is kind of like Crazy King. It's kind of like Hardpoint. So obviously, if you look at a standard map, there are like 5 possible points on the map, right? There's A, B, and C for control or zone control. And then there's the 3 tiebreaker zones for Dominion. And usually one of those tiebreaker zones is always on B or like very close to B. And then the other 2 are also at neutral points. So total, there's like 5 control points on the map, right? So what collision is it is one of those control points is active at a time. And the zone itself is actually like larger than a normal control zone, right? So it can't just, it's not like gigantic, right? Like, don't get me wrong, it doesn't cover like the entire region. Yeah. But it's just like bigger than a normal control zone, so it can't be like entirely covered up by a bubble or whatever it is. But the point, you capture the point, and as you hold the point, you accrue score. I think it's like you get 1 point every 2 seconds or something like that, and it's first to 100. And after an amount of time of that zone being held, the zone rotates to somewhere else around the map. And so you have to move around the map and fight in all these different locations to try to capture that 1 point. And the thing that's really fun about it is because only one team can score points at a time, you're technically never out of a match. Like, if you are losing 99-0, if you prevent the other team from ever capturing a point, you can literally win a game from 99 points down by just like playing better than the other team. And we've had some super fun, really heated playtest with that, especially in like our sweat playtest, which is like our high engagement playtest, which is where all like the sweaty PvP players like play against each other. And it's honestly like really fun. And so it's going to go into
That sounds
labs.
really great.
Yeah, it's going to go into labs, and we'll obviously take feedback and iterate on it. But
So then, question: is there a mercy rule if that type of comeback is possible?
Nope, there's
please
no
no,
mercy
please.
rule.
Oh, that's so good.
Wow.
So good. That annoys me in so many other modes where I was like,
Yeah.
I can come back here. Why'd you stop?
Well, because the
Nope,
Crucible
there's
is
no
no
mercy
place
rule.
for mercy. Yeah.
So we made it
Exactly.
like the way we aligned the points and the timer. Like the game will eventually end at like 10 minutes, but like the way Collision works, the game should never end at time, right? Like there should never be a point in the game where you're like, we can't come back from this. Like the intent of the game mode was that it doesn't matter how many points the other team has or how big your deficit is. You should always feel like if we play well enough, we can still win this game. So,
Merc, I want to let you know
That's
that
awesome.
the two questions in chat coming up the most, which you may or may not be able to speak on. One of them is, I mean, you're on the weapons team, right? Craftable Hawkmoon question mark. And the other one is, why are you wearing sleeves right now?
I'm a professional now. This is my business formal attire. Like I can't just rip the sleeves off all the time. I'm representing the company. I gotta
Rip them
look
off
like a
right now.
professional.
I feel like you want to have those pythons represent the company for sure, right?
Crafted Hawkman. I don't know, man. Maybe one day. Not my area to speak on that stuff. So
Fair enough. I mean, you'd put Zur out of a job, right? Poor Zur.
maybe already, looking kind of rough over there. I don't know if he's been getting too many strange coins anymore. So
I mean, related, not related. I've been using Revision 0. That is a pretty good pulse. Both modes.
thanks. I think so too. I'm about to hit 20,000 PvP kills on mine.
That's nuts. I've
Sheesh.
been shuffling
Yeah.
both input devices on it. It's been really good.
Yeah, and I've got a PvE one too that I think I'm over like 10,000 feats in PvE on it. So I spent a lot of time on Revision
No,
0.
I'm not that
since
dedicated. I just use my PvP one in PvE.
It's really good in PvE. Like the heavy burst mode in particular is phenomenal, and when you get Vorpal weapon and 4 times the charm and everything, pretty good.
Well, if there's nothing else
The-
you have the ability to comment on, Drew, you got something?
I got a few.
Okay,
One,
okay,
I guess.
great.
One or two. The special. So I think it mentioned. I'm like trying to remember off the top of my head that Collision is featuring this special ammo system, right? Is that coincided with the mode somehow, or is that like just that's a system that's taking place, being tried out, debuting in the mode?
So Collision, we'll have to see how the feedback goes. Like right now, Collision and the special ammo. So the special ammo crates, just like the special ammo meter and just like the respawn system in private matches, they could be applied to anything at all, right? But right now, Collision is being tested with the special ammo crates. Hardware, when hardware comes out, we'll have the special ammo crates. Those modes were designed like alongside special ammo crates. If people really hate special ammo crates, we could put the meter into those modes instead, right? But they play pretty well with the crates because the crates offer additional points around the map, right? And because of the way the crates
Yeah.
are laid out, the crates are near the places where zones are, so you never feel like you're having to run really far out of the way to get a crate. And there's 4 crates. I think we explained this in the twit, right? Like there's one crate by A, B, and C zones, and then there's another neutral crate, and that neutral crate is by one of the trials. So it's there too. So, I think it's a neat
Snipers
system.
are hitting them.
Yeah, I enjoy the crate system, especially in games like Clash. Like I think crates works really well.
Your connection's bugging just a little bit.
Again, oh, man,
Yeah.
I just started talking about the good stuff. But I was gonna say I enjoy the crate system in something like Clash because Clash otherwise doesn't really have an objective force movement around the map, and I think the crate system kind of helps with that. So we'll see. But like with meter system, we put it into PvP, we take feedback on it, we iterate. With the crate system, we put it into PvP, we take feedback, we iterate, and hopefully through a combination of all this stuff, we can come up with a really good ammo system term. So.
Okay, not a question, but something I saw in chat, an observation. Tommy's matchbook bugged hit registration. Just saying it, so they're like, yeah, Kimmy mentioned it.
Is that like a question? Is it like I'm Ron
Well-
Burgundy? Like
Yeah.
I don't know what he's.
I like Scotch.
I got no comment on that. So yeah.
Have you tried gut shot in the new? So obviously, body shots are worth less now, like less damage. Have you personally tried gut shot yet in the new sandbox? And if so, what did you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It counteracts the penalty that the mode kind of inflicts on you for hitting body shots. Like especially sidearms and stuff with gut shot are like really, really strong in that mode. I think the element with gut shot is quite good. Like the aim assist penalty that gut shot gets is now, I think, able to be overcome by accurate players. So I don't think it's really that bad anymore. But it's another one of those perks, just like precision engine, that's going to offer you an amount of forgiveness, and can potentially change the way some guns play in that mode. I don't think it's going to be great on everything. Don't get me wrong, but there are definitely some things that's pretty strong on.
Cool.
I can definitely still hear your answer, but it sounds like somebody at Bungie is giving you the Crota treatment right now, and you're like
They're
fiddling with pulling the Ethernet cord out a little bit and trying to keep Merc down. Damn.
What a shame. Oh well, I guess that's got to be it for me tonight. You guys can't hear me anymore. I was getting so close to revealing all the secrets about Destiny, but yeah, no more.
I was about to comment about sex finally being added to D2 after years of Twitter requesting.
Oh, it's always been in D2. You guys just haven't found it yet.
Jesus Christ. Oh man. Drew, you got more? I want to make sure again we're being respectful of Merc's time. He's been a really great sport. A lot of good conversation.
Ask one more, but like I said,
you can ask one more.
One more, and that's it for.
This is gonna be one that's like I know is probably like I'm shooting my shot, and you can just be like, all right, Drew,
go.
You can be quiet now.
All right.
So I only thought of this because of the question about the cascade point, or
Crafting guns?
Yeah, like crafting guns, cascade point, or desperado on the hand cannons.
Mm-hmm.
Box breathing on a 180 hand cannon. You can be quiet.
Exotic, not forgotten.
You don't have to.
I gave you precision instrument on a 180 hand cannon. How much more do you need? Doesn't that let you 3-tap some resiliences? It might not anymore in the new sandbox, unfortunately. But
yeah, I don't know if it will anymore. But I've actually been using it, to be honest. Like I've actually had a good deal of fun. It's like the way that I treat the perk right now is like it's better forgiveness majority of the time because everyone's like playing like with Titans being popular. It's like everyone's at like barely anyone's at a low resilience level. But if it happens, like I'm shooting as if it's gonna happen, and if it does happen, I get a little surprised, and I'm like, ah. But also transferring between targets is really cool. Like you can really get into like a rhythm because you have a bit more time to play with, I think, than like something like target lock. So if you start like transferring damage between targets, it's really cool. It kind of makes your 180 essentially do the same thing as a 140. So that's neat.
I'm glad you like that perk. That was one that I was pretty thrilled to make. I thought it was a fun idea. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
There you go. Well done. We'd like to give another thank you. Everybody in the chat right now, thank you to Merc. Thank you to Bungie for allowing Merc to come here allegedly and speak to us about the past 2 PvP twids. We really appreciate the extra insight and the follow-up and all the conversation that you brought to the table. I'm looking forward to March 5th. I mean, a lot of it sounds right up my goddamn alley. So, I mean, I'm sure you're going to be in there. Are you going to be playing on March 5th, Merc? Or are you going to be doing?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Whenever we have a big release, we get time set aside at work to like actually play in live alongside the release. So
Jingleheimer better show up. No more special. No, I mean maybe.
His hours are numbered. But yeah, thank you very much, Merc. We really do appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it.
Damn right. Damn right. Really quickly, 2 seconds. Cammy, tell the people where they can find you.
Don't worry about that.
Cool guy games. Cool, great.
Cool guy games. That's the important one.
Cool guy. just go sub to Cool Guy, please. And I'm going to go ahead and let the auto host feature